Chapter 25:12, Forceful Purchase. To most people, the celestial king tier was in sight but unreachable. Thus, it was every person's dream to reach this lofty height. Su Chang also wore an expression of yearning. He completely agreed with Tang Qi's words, so he didn't continue to tease his friend. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "As long as you put in the effort, perhaps there'll be a sliver of hope. TSK, what cultivation level are you at? Yet you're actually trying to console us?" Su Chang and Tang Qi playfully chided. They both recovered back to their jovial selves. If Ling Han wanted to, he could give both of them a celestial king pill, allowing them to immediately become celestial kings. However, they would be forever stuck at this level, with no chance to ever grow stronger. Besides, he had left all of his celestial king pills in the celestial realm. Moreover, he wasn't that generous, either. These two people were not yet his friends, and Ling Han was more so not a stupidly nice person. He involuntarily thought to himself, just how good would business be if he sold celestial king pills here? However, did a celestial path exist here? If a celestial path didn't exist, how would he obtain celestial seeds? If he couldn't obtain celestial seeds, how would he refine celestial king pills? Forget about it, there was no point thinking about this anymore. He returned to the stand that he had been at before, picking up the cauldron, and asking, "What's the price for this item?" 100 million star stones, the middle-aged man said. At the same time, he even raised a single finger to stress his point. "You might as well rob someone," Tang Qi exclaimed in anger. This cauldron didn't exude any might, and what use was its stupid sturdiness? Perhaps they would use it to smack someone? If you want to buy it, then that's the price. "I'm not forcing you to buy it, am I?" the middle-aged man said with a chuckle. He turned his gaze away from Tang Qi, and it was as if he viewed him with complete disdain. "You're angering me to death," Tang Qi shouted. Ling Han didn't have so many star stones with him. He pondered for a moment before saying, "I don't have so many star stones on me. However, look at this item. Do you need it?" He retrieved a fire element crystal, handing it over to the middle-aged man. The man didn't take him seriously, and this was mainly because Ling Han's cultivation level was far too low. What valuable items could he possess? However, he immediately screamed in pain upon accepting the fire element crystal. In fact, he almost threw it away. It was hot, far too hot. "What are you doing? If you break it, can you afford the compensation?" Tang Qi chided. He immediately seized this opportunity to berate the middle-aged man. He then bent down to pick the crystal up. However, he involuntarily yelped upon picking it up. "Pa!" The crystal was dropped to the ground again. "PFF." Su Chang burst into laughter. "Say, Brother Tang, is there any need to tease others like this? You even copied him dropping the item. This is Brother Ling's item, so how will you compensate him if you truly break it?" He bent down to pick the crystal up. However, he immediately exclaimed in astonishment upon touching the crystal. Even his face became green. It was far too hot. Was that still a crystal? It was clearly the essence of fire. The middle-aged man finally came to his senses. He wore a serious expression as he walked out from behind his stand. He reached over with his right hand, yet this time, there was a layer of regulations around his hand. He then grabbed the crystal. An expression of wild delight instantly spread across his face. Is this a concentrated crystal of the regulations of fire? It possesses the terrifying great Tao of fire within it. If I obtain enough of such crystals, I might even be able to comprehend the complete great Tao of fire and advance to the celestial king tier. Tang Qi and Su Chang were both astonished upon hearing this. This scalding hot crystal was actually this impressive? They exchanged a glance before shaking their heads. One of them practiced the regulations of wood, while one of them practiced the regulations of earth. Both of these had nothing to do with the regulations of fire. Huh? You retrieved it with your hand just then, so why wasn't your hand burned? Tang Chi suddenly exclaimed. He was no fool, and he immediately noticed this problem. He looked at Ling Han in astonishment. Su Chang was also astounded. He hurriedly grabbed Ling Han's hand, spreading it open to observe. It was as smooth as jade. Where were the burn marks? How strange. He hurriedly grabbed Ling Han's other hand. However, it was also uninjured. Even the middle-aged man clicked his tongue in wonder. They had all examined the might of this crystal, and they discovered that it was difficult to hold it even with the power of regulations wrapped around their hands. They could still feel the devastating heat of the crystal, and it was only just barely manageable. With such a lowly cultivation, how had Ling Han managed to hold this crystal with no problems at all? Ling Han smiled, and said, "Perhaps my skin is thick and tough." This was the blatant truth. His physique was at the second heaven. Moreover, this crystal had only been refined from the earth fire, so its might naturally wasn't comparable to that of origin fire. As such, he could handle it with ease. "How many of these crystals do you have?" the middle-aged man asked. He was extremely enticed by these crystals, so much so that he couldn't be bothered figuring out why Ling Han hadn't been burned. After all, many things in this world couldn't be explained. 10, Ling Han replied. He naturally possessed more than 10, but wasn't business all about haggling? He wasn't running a charity, after all. The middle-aged man hesitated upon hearing this. He had found this cauldron in an ancient tomb that was most likely several epochs old. He knew this because he had asked someone to appraise some other items for him, allowing him to determine the age of the tomb. He was adamant that this cauldron was special, and it was because of this that he had priced it at 100 million star stones. However, he couldn't list any redeeming quality of this cauldron apart from its sturdy nature. As such, he didn't have the confidence to haggle. So be it, he would take 10 of these crystals. He didn't want to wait any longer. He gritted his teeth, nodding, and said, "All right, deal." Wait. Right at this moment, a large hand suddenly reached over, grabbing at the cauldron. While they were haggling just then, the middle-aged man had also taken the cauldron back. He was completely unprepared at this moment, and the cauldron was just about to be taken by that person. Pang! However, Ling Han suddenly launched a kick, striking the middle-aged man. A burst of power surged over, causing his body to involuntarily contort. At the same time, the cauldron just swung out of reach of the large hand. The person who had reached over was astonished. The middle-aged man had contorted in an extremely clever manner, actually causing him to miss. This was absolutely incredible. Lord Yang Zhishuan. Tang Chi and Su Chang both exclaimed in astonishment. The person who had interfered was actually Yang Zhishuan. Yang Zhishuan had also felt a sudden urge when he saw the cauldron. He also couldn't identify anything special about the cauldron, but since he had felt a sudden urge, he had to buy it to investigate no matter what. "Hand it over," he said in a deep voice, with his might as a celestial king booming through the surroundings. The middle-aged man involuntarily shuddered. "But Lord, I've already sold the cauldron to him," he said as he pointed to Ling Han. He didn't give in after being frightened. He still maintained his integrity. Yang Zhishuan peered down at Ling Han, his eyes full of disdain. Such a measly person dared to compete with him? What a hilarious joke. He frowned, and said, "How many star stones?" "I'll pay double." The middle-aged man hesitated upon hearing this. In reality, he was in greater need of the fire element crystals. After all, these crystals would give him a sliver of hope to reach the celestial king tier. Ling Han humphed, and said, "If you had arrived earlier, you could have competed fairly. with the highest bidder obtaining the cauldron. However, we've already settled on a price and made a deal, yet you still insist on forcefully purchasing the item. You're showing such wanton disregard for the rules. Su Chang and Tang Qi instantly went pale upon hearing this. That was Yang Zhixuan. To say nothing of his identity as a follower of Heaven-born, he was still a mighty celestial king. In fact, he had just defeated a proper disciple who was a second heaven celestial king. If one talked back to him, one would definitely suffer a tragic end. Chapter 25:13, Tearing Apart a Battle Armor with Bare Hands. Yang Zhixuan also hadn't imagined that Ling Han would dare to talk back to him. He faltered for a brief moment before coming to his senses. However, he wasn't enraged. After all, did a mighty celestial king need to take the words of such a measly person to heart? He could simply end the conversation by smacking them to death, couldn't he? However, such naive youths were truly rare to come across. He was slightly intrigued, and he said, "Brat, do you not understand that might is right in this world? My cultivation is far superior to yours, so much so that I can squish you to death with a single finger. Are you not afraid?" Ling Han laughed as he raised his right hand, clenching it into a fist. "I can also smash you to death with a single punch. Do you believe me?" Yang Zhixuan faltered upon hearing this. He then burst into loud laughter. Where in the world had this naive youth come from? What an extremely fun person. It was because of this that he hadn't developed killing intent either. However, a thought suddenly occurred to him, and he immediately summoned a sword that pierced at Ling Han. He simply wanted to make Ling Han suffer a little and teach him a lesson. Wang! The tip of the sword immediately reached Ling Han's chest. Ling Han immediately lashed out. Pang! His fist smashed into the tip of the sword, instantly causing the sword to shatter. Before Yang Zhixuan could even react, Ling Han's fist continued to surge forward. Pang! The fist smashed into Yang Zhixuan's chin. A person instantly soared into the sky, quickly transforming into a small black dot. "What's going on?" someone asked. There were naturally spectators around them, and these people couldn't help but grimace. They all wore stupefied expressions. Where was Yang Zhixuan? Why had he suddenly run away? Even if they were beaten to death, they would still refuse to believe that he had been sent flying by Ling Han's punch. Even Su Chang and Tang Qi didn't believe this. With their vision, they naturally couldn't have seen the exchange anyway. After all, even Yang Zhixuan hadn't had the time to react. That being the case, how could measly ascending origin tier cultivators have hoped to catch Ling Han's movement? Thus, they all believed that Yang Zhixuan had left by himself. Perhaps, something urgent had suddenly come up. TSK. This celestial king was truly a benevolent person. Even though he had left for an urgent matter, he could have still smacked Ling Han to death with a single palm. Killing him would have been as easy as killing a fly. However, he hadn't done that. Just how benevolent was he? How detestable. However, just as they were all praising him, a loud roar suddenly traveled over. Yang Zhixuan appeared before them again. He was striding through the air, and there was a clear lump on his chin. There was also blood seeping from the corners of his mouth, and when he opened it to speak, it was also clear that he had lost several teeth. Huh? What's going on? Perhaps Yang Zhixuan hurried away to fight someone else just then? But the battle was so quick that he's already finished? Anyhow, whom is he roaring at? Ling Han ignored him. He had initially wanted to smash Yang Zhixuan to death with a single punch. However, since Yang Zhixuan hadn't attacked him with killing intent, he also decided to show some mercy. He simply gave him a lesson. After all, there was indeed no great animosity between them. He retrieved another 9 fire element crystals, and handed them to the middle-aged man. He then grabbed the cauldron, and placed it in his spatial celestial tool. I truly underestimated you. You're a wolf in sheep's clothing. Very well. Yang Zhixuan said in a baleful voice. He had truly been far too reckless. It was because of this that he had been struck by Ling Han. At the very least, this was what he believed. What? Everyone went numb with shock upon hearing this. Yang Zhixuan's wound had been caused by Ling Han. Otherwise, why had he said that? However, how was this possible? What was Ling Han's cultivation level? If he could send a celestial king flying with a single punch, wouldn't the entire cultivation system be upheaved? Only at this moment did Ling Han glance up at Yang Zhixuan, saying, if you want to speak, then come down to speak. Do you not know that this is extremely disrespectful? Yang Zhixuan was enraged upon hearing this. He was being disrespectful. And the punch just then was respectful? His expression was baleful, and he said, into the sky for a battle. There were far too many passers-by here, so even though it would be fine to kill a few, wreaking too much havoc would definitely invite punishment from the higher-level celestial kings. Ling Han frowned and said, you still haven't learned your lesson? Enough with the nonsense. Yang Zhixuan roared. Pung! Ling Han bent his knees and launched up using his explosive leg power, not relying on the power of regulations at all. Even though he was simply using brute strength, his speed was still astonishing. He couldn't fly using the power of regulations, since he only possessed the power of regulations at the dividing soul tier. As such, his flying speed would be as slow as a snail. If he fought like this, could he ever hope to hit his opponent? However, the speed of his jump was insane, and he arrived before Yang Zhixuan in a flash. He then threw another punch. Xiao! Yang Zhixuan was sent flying again. Boom! There was a deafening boom as Ling Han landed back on the ground. His violent landing created a huge crater, and it also unleashed a massive shock wave that sent the people in the surroundings sprawling. Everyone was transfixed with shock upon seeing this. Even though they hadn't seen the situation clearly, it was without a doubt that Yang Zhixuan had been sent flying again. Moreover, the culprit was none other than Ling Han. Gasp! Holy Mother of God! Su Chang and Tang Qi were both numb with shock. They were more so overcome with an indescribable feeling. Thinking back, they had still been referring to Ling Han as a friend and brother. In fact, they had even teased him before. However, as it turned out, Ling Han hadn't lied to them at all. They had actually been treated as equals while messing around with such a person. Who would believe this? Ah! Yang Zhixuan flew back again, with his face comprehensively ruined now. It was filled with blood, and he appeared both ferocious and disheveled. He stared daggers at Ling Han, and his eyes were filled with raging fury. This was utter humiliation. Utter humiliation. Just then, he had defeated Doka in battle, greatly elevating his reputation and standing. After all, he had defeated a proper disciple as a follower. Now, however, he had been sent flying twice by an unknown brat who wasn't even a celestial king. These were the great ups and downs of life. It was truly a stimulating spectacle. However, this second punch finally allowed him to recognize the strength of Ling Han. He couldn't have avoided these punches by simply being careful. He humphed as he summoned his battle armor again, completely covering himself up. This instantly filled him with confidence and self-belief. With the protection of the battle armor, he was already standing in a position of definite victory. "Do you dare to battle me?" he roared. Ling Han was like a delighted predator seeing his prey. He indeed wanted to test out the strength of this battle armor. He wanted to see how many of his punches it could withstand. Pung! He unleashed his explosive power again, shooting into the sky. Yang Zhixuan couldn't react at all, and a forceful fist had already slammed into his chest. Under the powerful force of the punch, the symbols on the battle armor all lit up, forming a layer of light on the surface of the armor. This layer of light was a powerful defensive mechanism. Indeed, this was the first defensive line of the battle armor. However, the formidable power of the punch instantly shattered this layer of light, ripping through its defenses. Meanwhile, the punch continued to surge forward. If time were slowed down 10,000-fold, one would be able to see the armor denting inward, forming a deep crater that was eventually unable to resist the stress. In the end, the armor completely collapsed and shattered. Just as Ling Han had predicted before, as long as one's power was formidable enough to surpass the limit of the battle armor's regenerative ability, they would be completely capable of destroying it with brute strength. Ling Han unleashed a roar as he swung both his fists. Like a piece of thin cloth, the battle armor was instantly torn to shreds. Like a weak and defenseless young girl, Yang Zhixuan stood there with his mouth wide agape, unable to make a single sound. Even though it was only his battle armor that had been torn apart, he felt as if it were his clothes that had been ripped off, completely exposing him to everyone. This was utterly humiliating. Beneath them, everyone was transfixed with utter shock. Tearing apart a suit of battle armor with his bare hands. Could he refrain from being so violent? Chapter 25:14, Change of Mind. Just then, they had all been speculating about Ling Han's strength. After all, none of them had caught the instance when Ling Han had sent Yang Zhixuan flying. Now, however, the situation was completely different. They could all see the scenes in the sky clearly. Just how powerful was that suit of battle armor? Everyone was aware of this. After wearing it, Yang Zhixuan could even defeat Doka, someone he couldn't rival with his own strength. This battle armor wasn't a celestial tool, yet it was only slightly inferior to celestial tools. It was incredibly rare and valuable. But now? Someone had brutally ripped it to shreds with their bare hands. Fuck. 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 Who could believe this? This was like a scene out of a legendary tale. Even though they were witnessing it with their own eyes, they could still barely believe what they were seeing. After tearing the battle armor to shreds, Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. He had overestimated this suit of battle armor. He had initially thought that it was very sturdy, but as it turned out, it was only so. It was only defensively powerful thanks to the symbols engraved on its surface, which allowed it to form a powerful defensive barrier of light. Of course, if one's strength couldn't suppress the battle armor by too much, it would indeed appear to be indestructible and invincible. Moreover, it could even regenerate itself. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Should we continue this battle?" Yang Zhixuan instinctively shook his head. Even with the suit of battle armor, he had still been no match for Ling Han. Thus, what was the point of continuing the battle? Most importantly, Ling Han still appeared as if he were an extremely weak person. This contrast was far too great, and it was almost impossible to accept. Ling Han slowly descended from the sky. This wasn't on purpose. Rather, if he wanted to fly, he had to rely on the power of regulations. However, in terms of his mastery of the regulations, he was only at the dividing soul tier. Thus, this was the limit of his speed. Everyone was rendered speechless upon seeing this. No matter how they looked, Ling Han was only at the dividing soul tier. However, he had managed to defeat a mighty celestial king. Lord Ling. Tang Qi and Su Chang said in a reserved manner upon seeing Ling Han land as they walked over. This was a freakish person who could easily defeat a second heaven celestial king. Would they still dare to refer to Ling Han as a brother? Ling Han smiled in reply, yet he didn't say anything to console them. After all, his strength was indeed far superior to that of these two people. In a world where the hierarchy of power meant everything, it was indeed impossible for them to act as equals. It was fun hanging out with you guys. If you ever encounter any troubles in the future, you can come to the academy to find me, Ling Han said to them. Thank you, Lord. Tang Qi and Su Chang replied in delight. To say nothing of whether they could actually gain an audience with Ling Han in the future, just the fact that he had said this in public before so many people was already enough. This would act as a warning for other people. If they dared to target Tang Qi and Su Chang, they might possibly incur Ling Han's wrath. Ling Han nodded in reply. After this battle, he was confident that the Martial Academy would definitely send someone over to meet him. He left the marketplace, returning to the small village. He would wait for the people from the Martial Academy here. Since he was free anyway, he decided to put on a disguise and visit the tavern again. Right now, he was still extremely unfamiliar with the Martial Academy. While sitting around in the tavern, he heard the spirited discussions of many people. If we're talking about the most powerful new disciple of the Martial Academy, that's got to be Huoferong, someone shouted after having one too many drinks. He was arguing with someone else, and he continued, according to rumors, she actually possesses an origin flame. Just this alone is already enough for her to crush celestial kings at the same level. Moreover, she's indescribably powerful to begin with, and I've heard that her evolution index is extremely close to 12. He was extremely loud, and his comments instantly caused the surrounding customers to reply with an "oh." Only a pitifully few people possessed an evolution index above 10, not to mention an evolution index of close to 12. I say, Ji Wuming is the most powerful, someone said in disagreement. In a short 1 million years, he's already soared from the first heaven to the third heaven. Who can compete with such progress? No, Lord Luan Xing is the most powerful. There's no reason for this, other than the fact that Lord Luan Xing is the most beautiful. Her beauty is unrivaled through the ages, someone shouted. This viewpoint won the support of many people. Everyone nodded in agreement. Even those who supported Huoferong and Ji Wuming had to concede that she was indeed unbelievably beautiful. Ling Han smiled in his mind. His wife was indeed stunningly beautiful. Even he felt extremely smug about this. A grossly drunk person suddenly stood up, and said, "No, no, no, even though these people are all very powerful, which of them can rival Lord Heavenborn?" The tavern instantly fell silent. That person's an absolute demon. Just because someone slandered him behind his back, he destroyed an entire city as revenge, someone said with a pale expression. But his talent is far too impressive. 2 heavenly Venerates actually argued over the right to take him as a disciple. In fact, they even threw hands. Even as strong as Huoferong is, she's only at the 3rd heaven. However, Lord Heavenborn is already at the 5th heaven. His cultivation speed is unrivaled in all ages. No one can compare to him. His strength had already far exceeded those at the same generation as him. In fact, only the older generation of prodigies can compare to him. For example, Amu. There's also Can Yu. And Du Shi. The others also chimed in with several names. Each one of these prodigies was powerful enough to make heaven and earth lose its luster. These people have already reached the peak stage of the 9 heaven long ago, and they're only a single step away from reaching the heavenly venerable tier. All they need is a suitable opportunity. Everyone nodded in agreement. Heavenborn's power was far superior to those at the same cultivation level as him. I've heard rumors that the same dimension also produced another prodigy. In fact, Lord Zhouheng even left a dimensional transfer seal for him. Since he's regarded with such importance, he can't be much weaker than Lord Heavenborn, right? Someone suddenly said. Ling Han's ears immediately perked up. Were they not talking about him? Upon hearing this, the others instantly clicked their tongues in wonder. Zhouheng was a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, almost belonging to the strongest echelon of elites. His every action would attract the gaze of others. I've heard that he's already dead, someone else said in disdain. I've also heard that. He was enemies with Lord Heavenborn, and in the end, he was slain by Lord Heavenborn. To become enemies with Lord Heavenborn. He deserved to die. If he's alive, 1,000,000 years have already passed, so why has he still not appeared? He's already a dead person, so what does it matter how astonishingly prodigious he was? All of that is worthless. Many people shook their heads, expressing their extreme disdain for Ling Han. Ling Han was extremely displeased upon seeing this. These people had never seen him before, so how could they possibly know that he was incapable? Heavenborn was indeed very powerful, but that was because he was the embodiment of the celestial realm. His physique was astounding, and he had also been tempered by fundamental power before. Thus, his battle prowess was naturally terrifying. However, all of this was because of his incredible birth. Moreover, one had to realize that the celestial realm was only a low-level dimension. In fact, it was a super low-level dimension. Thus, even though it had cheated and created an embodiment of itself, the growth of this person would definitely have a limit. At most, he could only become a second-tier heavenly venerate due to his background. Afterward, he would need to rely on himself and his opportunities to advance any further. If Ling Han wanted to suppress Heavenborn, he would need to possess an upper hand in terms of cultivation level. After reaching the heavenly venerable tier, however, Heavenborn's advantage due to his physique would also vanish. This was because divine metal couldn't withstand the destructive power of heavenly venerates. Ling Han was extremely confident in himself. Moreover, he would also cultivate the indestructible heaven scroll diligently, fighting to raise his physique to the level of divine metal as well. At that time, he wouldn't suffer a disadvantage when facing off against Heavenborn again. At this moment, a thought suddenly occurred to him. Before cultivating the indestructible heaven scroll to a pinnacle level, he definitely couldn't reveal his true identity. Otherwise, what would he do if he came across Heavenborn? Perhaps he could only flee? However, he didn't want to be on the back foot. Thus, concealing his identity was most likely the best choice. He silently stood up and left, not returning to the inn. Instead, he strode away from the village, directly setting off for the world's paramount martial academy. Chapter 25:15, 9 Deaths Formation. Ling Han arrived before the martial academy. While chatting with Tang Qi and Su Chong before, he had learned that entering the martial academy was actually extremely simple. As long as one was powerful enough, they could enter the martial academy any time they wanted. They only needed to do one thing: past the 9 Deaths Formation. This formation sat at the gate of the martial academy, and as long as one managed to pass it, they would be able to enter the martial academy. At that time, someone would immediately come over to register them as a disciple of the martial academy. This formation was called the 9 Deaths Formation, and it consisted of 9 different levels in total, with each level being more difficult to pass than the previous. However, one only needed to pass the first level to enter the academy. There was no need to pass all 9 levels. It was said that the 9 Deaths Formation corresponded to the 9 heavens of the Celestial King tier. However, even 8th heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't necessarily be able to pass the first level of the 9 Deaths Formation. Why was this? This was because, in the first level of the 9 Deaths Formation, one's cultivation level would be suppressed to the first heaven. Thus, an advantage in cultivation level would be completely useless here. The 9 Deaths Formation was extremely difficult to pass. Moreover, even though the empress and the others had been brought over by Zhou Heng, they had still needed to challenge the 9 Deaths Formation. This was the rule of the martial academy. If one couldn't pass this formation, they wouldn't be able to enter the martial academy. This was because the martial academy wouldn't give disciples free pass tokens or similar things. Each time they entered the academy, they would need to challenge this formation. If one couldn't pass this formation with their own abilities, would they have the face to enter the martial academy? The time it took for each person to pass the 9 deaths formation also varied greatly. The quicker one was, the better their result naturally was. Thus, there was also a ranking attached to this formation. It was said that only the most brilliant individuals could make it onto this ranking. The 9 deaths formation had already existed for several epochs. Thus, it had already been challenged by countless prodigies, many of whom had created great legends and legacies. As a result, trying to push into the rankings at this moment would be as difficult as trying to ascend the heavens. After all, this was equivalent to competing against countless prodigies from countless dimensions through countless generations. Each day, there would be many people challenging the formation, dreaming of entering the world's paramount martial academy. Becoming a disciple of this martial academy would be the greatest confirmation of their talent and the greatest glory they could experience. A man walked over and asked Ling Han, "Little brother, are you also here to challenge the formation?" There was a single ribbon of iridescent light around him. He was clearly a first heaven celestial king, yet he was wearing an amiable smile, and didn't appear haughty or arrogant at all. Ling Han nodded with a smile, replying, "Yes." The man was dressed in a green robe, and he looked to be around 30 years old. However, judging by his flame of life, he had already lived for at least several epochs. Thus, it wasn't demeaning for him to refer to Ling Han as "little brother." The celestial king was extremely astonished upon hearing this reply. This was because Ling Han didn't look like a celestial king at all. Was he here to seek death? "Young friend, this is no place for you to muck around," another person said. This was a beautiful female celestial king. Ling Han smiled, and replied, "No worries, I know what I'm doing." Everything will be fine as long as you know what you're doing," another celestial king said. He was dressed in black, and he was exuding an extremely dark and cold aura. "Say, why are you people speaking so much nonsense with a young child?" a celestial king with an extremely large head yet extremely small body said. He wore an expression of impatience. "Just going off your courage alone, little friend, follow big sister, I'll definitely protect you," the female celestial king said with a smile. Her expression was seductive and alluring. Celestial kings should have all possessed steel-strong willpowers. However, upon seeing the smile of this female celestial king, the male celestial kings couldn't help but feel enticed. It was clear that she was skilled in the art of seduction and manipulation. Otherwise, she couldn't have wavered the celestial kings no matter how beautiful she was. Ling Han smiled indifferently, and said, "Sure." He entered the formation with the other celestial kings. Including him, there were 7 people in total. Of course, there were naturally celestial kings who had entered before them, and there would naturally be celestial kings who entered after them. The Martial Academy didn't care about how many times they challenged the formation. Even if someone failed 10,000 times, they could still become a disciple if they eventually passed the formation. Of course, if they had only passed due to luck, they would most likely fail to re-enter the Martial Academy if they ever went out. At that time, it would be extremely embarrassing and awkward. After entering the formation, the surroundings still appeared the same as before. It was as if the formation didn't exist at all, and everything was only a lie. However, the 6 celestial kings didn't dare to let their guard down at all. They had already challenged this formation several times, so they naturally understood it very well even though the formation would change slightly every time. Ling Han secretly observed his own body, discovering that there was no restriction placed upon him. His state was the same as before. According to rumors, one would have the chance to pass this formation as long as they were a first heaven celestial king. However, regardless of how freakish a first heaven celestial king was, their battle prowess could only reach the peak stage of the 3rd heaven at a maximum. Thus, with Ling Han's current strength at the 5th heaven, would he not be able to pass this formation with ease? Because of this, he was extremely calm at this moment. If he still couldn't pass this formation with such strength, would there still be reason in this world? He clasped his hands behind his back, appearing as relaxed as could be. "Humph, brat, even though friend Plum Blossom is willing to help you, this doesn't mean that you're outstanding or whatnot. Quit pretending to be so relaxed and calm," the Celestial King in Black said in a cold voice. It was clear that he was slightly displeased. Fuck. They were moving around in such a cautious manner, yet Ling Han appeared as if he were taking a leisurely stroll. Was he treating them as bodyguards? They were bringing him over to expand his horizons, so he also had to fix up his attitude, no? The female Celestial King glared at the Celestial King in Black, and said, "Why are you arguing with a child?" She was the Plum Blossom Celestial King, and her beauty and fame were known far and wide. Countless Celestial Kings were trying to win her heart. The Celestial King in Black shut his mouth. However, there was a glimmer of killing intent in his eyes as he glanced at Ling Han. Ling Han indeed hadn't offended him. Whose fault was it that he was taking offense for no reason? Anyhow, finding an opportunity to kill Ling Han here would be far too easy. The latter had yet to reach the Celestial King tier, so killing him would be as easy as squashing an ant. "Be careful, it's about to begin," the Celestial King in Green said. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement. Even though the situation would be slightly different every time, the challenge would always begin around this area. The first battle was about to begin. Sure enough, after taking another step, 7 people suddenly appeared before them. Looking closely, these were 7 wooden puppets. They had no eyes, no ears, and no nose. Their bodies were also filled with symbols that radiated with overwhelming pressure. Wooden puppets could battle against Celestial Kings? Ling Han looked toward the Celestial Kings, only to see that their expressions were still calm. It was clear that this first wave of enemies wasn't powerful enough to trouble them. The battle began. Sure enough, the 7 wooden puppets all targeted a single person each. However, the 6 Celestial Kings teamed up to block all 7 of them. Without needing Ling Han to help, the 6 Celestial Kings quickly concluded the battle. Ling Han found this strange. If cooperation was allowed, wouldn't it be possible for powerful cultivators to bring weaker cultivators through the formation? After all, the Martial Academy had no rule against such cooperation. There was most likely some other mechanism to deal with this. They continued to push forward. The 6 Celestial Kings were extremely powerful when they teamed up, and they continued to brush through all challenges that they came across, not suffering a disadvantage even though they had to fight against 7 opponents. It wasn't long before they arrived in front of a foggy area. They all came to a halt. "Little friend, it's time for you to return," the Plum Blossom Celestial King said with a smile. "After entering here, each person has to fight for themselves, and it's impossible to help others. So, your adventure ends here." Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He naturally couldn't turn around and leave. Moreover, as it turned out, the true test only began here. "Let's go," the Celestial King in Green said, stepping forward to enter the fog. They had only been willing to bring Ling Han over for this adventure because of a sudden impulse. However, they naturally didn't view him with much importance. The Celestial Kings entered the fog one by one, immediately vanishing from sight. Ling Han was just about to step forward, yet he unexpectedly saw someone walking back out from the fog. It was the Celestial King in Black. There was killing intent on his face, and he didn't speak a single word as he swung his palm at Ling Han, aiming to kill this detestable insect. Chapter 25:16, Killed with a Single Punch. Pang! The palm swung over, triggering power fluctuations of the regulations. The Celestial King in Black was just about to turn around and re-enter the fog, yet his eyes suddenly bulged out. Had he seen a ghost? Ling Han was still standing there, safe and sound. In fact, he even cracked a grin, although this grin didn't make the man feel any sense of friendliness. Instead, he felt as if his head were about to explode in fear. How is this possible? So you've been concealing your strength, the Celestial King in Black exclaimed, immediately coming to a realization. Being able to block his attack was a clear sign that Ling Han's strength had definitely reached the Celestial King tier. Thus, regardless of whether he looked like a Celestial King or not, there was no doubt that he was indeed a Celestial King. Otherwise, his reaction would have been impossible. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Did I offend you? Why do you insist on killing me?" "Humph. You're clearly a Celestial King, yet you're still being so pretentious and purposely obscure. Your intentions deserve death," the Celestial King in Black said in a baleful voice. Even if Ling Han were a ninth heaven Celestial King, he would still be unafraid. This was because the 9 deaths formation would suppress everyone's cultivation level to the first heaven. Here, everyone was a first heaven Celestial King. As such, what did he have to fear? Ling Han laughed, and said, "Your words put me at ease. Now I can kill you without feeling any guilt at all. See, I'm a fairly friendly and kind person, aren't I? Unlike you. Not only are your clothes black, but even your heart is as black as charcoal." The expression of the Celestial King in Black instantly fell dark. Just how proper and solemn were Celestial Kings? Yet, Ling Han actually dared to taunt him like this? How immature. He didn't speak another word. Instead, he simply stared at Ling Han with killing intent. He would simply kill this person. There was zero need for so much drivel. Die. He immediately lashed out. Boom. His large hand transformed into a black sun that radiated with a scorching heat that could easily melt high-level pseudo-divine metal. This was the lunar fire essence. Ling Han was astonished. This lunar fire essence couldn't be refined by any random person. Instead, it could only be refined by those who had a deep understanding and comprehension of the great Tao of fire. In his view, only monarch tiers and above could possibly refine lunar fire essence. However, would a monarch tier be unable to pass the 9 deaths formation and enter the martial academy? You didn't refine this yourself, did you? Ling Han asked. As he said this, he casually threw a punch. Pang! The black sun was instantly obliterated, unable to withstand the might of his punch. The Celestial King in Black was shocked. Not only had his ultimate attack been blocked, but even his secret had been exposed. The lunar fire essence indeed hadn't been refined by him. Instead, he had extracted it from bones that he had found in the tomb of an ancient Celestial King. However, as a mighty Celestial King, he was actually using power that he had obtained from a corpse. Now that he had been exposed by Ling Han, he involuntarily felt a sense of shame and anger. This was even though Ling Han didn't know where exactly he had obtained this lunar fire essence from. He then felt a cold chill run down his spine. Just how devastatingly powerful was the lunar fire essence? Even he didn't dare to come into contact with it. This was naturally because it hadn't been refined by him, so he was only using it as a precious tool. He would only release it when he needed it. He trembled in fear. To unleash such might, just how insane was his opponent's battle prowess? A thought suddenly occurred to the Celestial King in Black, and he stammered, "Why, you're the person who defeated Yang Zhishuan with a single punch before." When news of this had spread, it had caused a huge commotion and argument, with most people adamant that this was only a baseless rumor. After all, how could a person below the Celestial King tier achieve such a feat? Now, however, he had also come across an equally freakish person whose cultivation level clearly appeared lowly. Yet, his strength was as domineering as could be. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Your guess is correct. Now, why don't you take another guess? Will I spare you or not?" If this person hadn't especially come out from the fog to kill Ling Han, the latter would have also ignored such a minor character. However, not only had the Celestial King in Black revealed killing intent toward Ling Han, but he had even acted on this intent. Thus, Ling Han naturally wouldn't show any mercy. This was a completely different situation from the one with Yang Zhixuan. A thought occurred to the Celestial King in Black, and he suddenly turned around to flee. He charged into the fog. This fog had a powerful ability to separate people, so even if two powerful Celestial Kings walked into it hand in hand, they would still be gradually separated without them noticing. They could only challenge the formation using their own strength. Thus, once he entered the fog, he would reach absolute safety. In the future, he would also flee far away from this place, avoiding this murderous person forever. "Heh, can you flee?" Ling Han said with a soft chuckle. He bent his knees before unleashing an explosive burst of power. Pang! His speed was terrifying as he caught up to the Celestial King in Black in a flash, throwing a punch at his back. The Celestial King in Black was petrified to death. He hurriedly channeled all of his power to his back, aiming to block this strike. At the same time, he would also borrow its momentum to charge into the depths of the fog. This was his only way to survive. Pang! The punch landed, and the Celestial King in Black's defense was instantly ripped apart as if it were wet paper. Like a hot knife through butter, the punch then ripped through the Celestial King's body, eventually protruding out the front of his chest. The Celestial King in Black was still running, yet he suddenly discovered that his power was rapidly draining away. His expression was dazed as he stared at the fist that had suddenly appeared before his chest. His eyes dimmed, and his head drooped. He was dead. Boom! Blood rain fell from the sky. Ling Han casually tossed the corpse of the Celestial King aside. However, he didn't forget to search his body. After all, there was no reason to abandon his spoils of battle. Without a second glance, he strode into the fog. This wasn't the first Celestial King that he had killed, so there was no need to think much about it. "Brother Lin, what do you think about this brat?" Inside the martial academy, two young men were currently enjoying a game of Go. There were no ribbons of iridescent light around them, and it was as if they were ordinary people. However, their eyes were incredibly sharp and intense, and even heaven and earth would tremble under their gaze. Brother Lin smiled faintly, and replied, "This brat has experienced a greatly fortunate encounter. He's clearly at the third heaven, yet he's already been tempered by fundamental power. His battle prowess is simply astonishing. However, he's no well-behaved person. He's already started killing people immediately upon arriving," the other man said with a smile. "This person was brought over by your junior brother Zhou, so in the future, he's also going to become a disciple under Lord Lin. The power of your branch is truly going to defy the heavens." He performed some calculations with his fingers, continuing, "Your esteemed master is a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and Brother Lin is a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. Brother Zhou Heng and Brother Chu Hao are also 6th-tier heavenly venerates. Counting this brat, your branch will have 5 heavenly venerates, with each having the potential to reach the 7th tier." Brother Lin laughed heartily. However, he shook his head, and said, "Even though Junior Brother Zhou, Junior Brother Chu, and I are all at the 6th tier, trying to advance to the 7th tier, will be as difficult as trying to ascend the heavens. In terms of this brat, he's indeed got a good background and foundation, so it won't be difficult for him to become a heavenly venerate. However, whether or not he can reach the 6th tier or even 7th tier is up to his fortunes." The other man nodded in agreement. Becoming a heavenly venerate wasn't dependent on talent alone. It would also be affected by countless other complicated matters. If someone heard this conversation, they would definitely be shocked to the core. This was because their words revealed that they were heavenly venerates. Moreover, one of them was a paramount 6th-tier heavenly venerate. Indeed, this Brother Lin was none other than Lin Xiaoyang, son of the 7th-tier heavenly venerate, Lin Luo. Meanwhile, the other person was Fu Yueyun. Both of them were 6th-tier heavenly Venerates. However, I still admire Brother Lin the most. Fu Yueyun said with a smile. Brother Lin's cultivation talent isn't outstanding, and in the past, you even lagged far behind your 2 senior brothers. Now, however, you've already caught up to them. In fact, you might even advance to the 7th tier before them. Lin Xiaoyang shook his head with a smile, saying, "That's all thanks to the hard work of my father." Meanwhile, junior brother Zhou and junior brother Chu are genuinely accumulating their cultivation for the future. Once they release it, their accomplishments will be no less than that of my father. As for me, the 6th tier is most likely my limit. Chapter 25:17, Remarks by Heavenly Venerates. Brother Lin, we truly don't need to worry about this brat? Fu Yueyun asked, changing the topic back to Ling Han. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly as he placed down a stone. He then said, "That brat has strong opinions, and junior brother Zhou has already said that we simply need to give him space to grow. There's no need to worry about him." "All right then," Fu Yueyun said with a nod. He then continued, "I've set my eyes on that fire girl, and I'm planning to take her as my disciple. You guys won't try to compete with me again, right?" Lin Xiaoyang involuntarily laughed, saying, "No, definitely not." Fu Yueyun nodded in satisfaction upon hearing this. He then placed a stone in reply. Lin Xiaoyang was slightly curious as he asked, "Brother Fu, why didn't you choose Heavenborn?" Fu Yueyun shook his head, and replied, "At the current stage, Heavenborn is indeed more outstanding. However, he's the culmination and embodiment of a dimension's willpower and essence. Even though he has a huge advantage in this sense, I predict that the 3rd tier will be his limit. Moreover, that will be after heaven knows how many hundreds of epochs." Lin Xiaoyang raised his thumb, praising, "Brother Fu is truly thorough in analysis. My father also remarked the same thing about this person. Moreover, he has a violent and ruthless personality, so who knows how many troubles he'll end up causing. Sigh, this is a rare chance to rest in peace for a few days. In a while, we'll have to leave the dimension to battle with hysteria again. I truly relish these peaceful days," Fu Yueyun said with a sigh. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly, and said, "Brother Fu, there'll eventually come a day when we dispose of hysteria and return to our respective homes. At that time, it'll be difficult for us to meet again. Right now, in order to face hysteria, the elites from countless dimensions were gathered here. However, once hysteria was defeated, everyone would naturally return to their own dimension. As such, it would naturally be difficult for them to meet again. I dearly wish that this brat is as Brother Zhou says, becoming a main force in the victory against hysteria in the future," Fu Yueyun said as he gazed into the distance. It was as if his gaze could pierce through all matter as he observed Ling Han, who was currently challenging the 9 Deaths formation. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly as he pinched a stone in his fingers. He had always been an optimistic person. Ling Han suddenly shivered, feeling as if he had been observed by some devastatingly powerful being. However, as he looked around, all he could see were layers of dense fog. He saw nothing else. Was it just my imagination? He shook his head. There were definitely heavenly venerates in the martial academy, so perhaps there had been a heavenly venerate observing him just then. With their paramount power, how could the 9 Deaths formation possibly block their vision? Ling Han strode forward. Whoosh! Clouds and mist gathered before him, transforming into a leopard that viciously lunged at him. Pang! He obliterated it with a single punch. Its vitality index was around 5,600. That's indeed powerful enough to trouble ordinary celestial kings. In fact, ordinary celestial kings were already emperor tiers. After reaching the peak stage of the first heaven, their vitality index would reach around 5,600. Now that the formation was producing such types of opponents, it was no wonder that most celestial kings would face a great deal of trouble. After all, monarch tiers were pitifully few in number. Ling Han continued to advance. Meanwhile, the formation also continued to produce opponents to face him. Sometimes there would only be a single opponent, while at other times there might be 2 or even 3 opponents. This would greatly trouble most ordinary celestial kings. In fact, it might even force them to flee. However, Ling Han could easily defeat all of them with a single punch. It didn't take him long to exit the land of fog. What appeared before him was a city. This city wasn't large, yet it was surrounded by a wall. Moreover, the city gates were also closed. On the 2 sides of the city were mountains that towered into the clouds, forming a canyon that the city sat in. In fact, the city was the checkpoint that blocked this path. If one wanted to continue forward, they would have to pass this city first. Ling Han didn't find the sudden appearance of this city strange. Nor was he astonished by the appearance of the towering mountains. After all, he was inside a formation, so he wouldn't be shocked even if stars in the core of the world appeared. He arrived before the city gates, only to see that it was filled with messy scrawls and symbols. However, even though they appeared messy at first sight, upon closer analysis, these symbols immediately appeared in his mind. It was as if he didn't need to remember them at all. The symbols flashed chaotically, giving him a headache. The city gates were tightly shut, and they were also decorated with a messy scrawl of symbols. It was evident that if one wanted to open the gates and enter the city, they would need to rearrange these symbols into some kind of specific character first. This was the next test. However, Ling Han wanted to try another method. He took a deep breath and bent his knees slightly. He then suddenly unleashed his power. Pang! He immediately soared up, aiming to directly jump over the city. Crack! Devastating arcs of lightning flashed chaotically, directly striking Ling Han from the sky and smashing him into the ground. Ow, that hurt! Ling Han bared his teeth in pain. Even with his astonishing physique, he still felt bone-crunching pain after being struck by the lightning. Sure enough, this city couldn't be bypassed with such ease. Then what about the city gates? He immediately threw a punch. Pang! The city gates remained unmoving. However, the shock of the punch caused his entire arm to ache. At this moment, Ling Han had no option but to solve the problem as required. He retreated several steps before looking up at the city gates. Even though the symbols had all appeared in his mind just then, they wouldn't remain there for too long. Thus, he had already forgotten all of them. This was extremely strange. Sha! There was the soft sound of footsteps, causing Ling Han to turn around. He saw the celestial king in green dashing out from the fog. He had initially been composed and graceful, yet right now, his clothes were ripped and his body was riddled with wounds. He appeared extremely disheveled. However, when he saw Ling Han, his expression was as if he had seen a ghost. He had truly seen a ghost. Otherwise, how could this brat appear here? Moreover, he was even quicker than him. The celestial king in green was absolutely stupefied, with his mouth slightly agape. Even though celestial kings were calm and composed, unblinking even if the heavens collapsed before them, he couldn't help but lose all of his composure at this moment. In fact, he was on the verge of spitting his tongue out in shock. This was far too strange. This was absolutely inconceivable. So Brother Green was still first, someone said with a strange laugh. Ling Han looked over, only to see the celestial king with the large head and small body making his way out of the fog. He fared no better, with his body drenched in blood. However, he was still burning with fighting spirit. Pooh! However, he instantly spluttered in shock upon seeing Ling Han. He wore a dumbfounded expression. So as it turns out, I'm third, the Plum Blossom Celestial King said as she appeared. Her clothes were also slightly tattered, revealing some of her alluring and snow-white skin. A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han. These Celestial Kings always challenged this formation together, but this wasn't to see the Plum Blossom Celestial King in her current state, was it? Pooh! The Plum Blossom Celestial King also spluttered in shock as she stared at Ling Han with a dazed expression. Afterward, the remaining two Celestial Kings also walked out from the fog one after the other. They also wore stupefied expressions when they saw Ling Han. In fact, the 5 Celestial Kings were all sharing the same thought at this moment. They had seen a ghost. Ling Han waved, and said, "We meet again." The 5 Celestial Kings felt as if they were in a dream. Even though Ling Han was standing right before them, they were still unable to accept and believe this. "Friend, so you've actually concealed your power this well," the Celestial King in green finally said. His voice was filled with emotion and realization. He was the first to be shocked, so he was naturally also the first to come to his senses. There was no other possibility. Ling Han had definitely been hiding his strength. His true cultivation was definitely at the Celestial King tier. "Heh, so we were all fooled," the Celestial King with the large head said. There was slight displeasure in his voice. This person was clearly a Celestial King, yet he purposefully acted like an amateur. Was he trying to toy with them? "Huh? Where's friend Ran?" the Plum Blossom Celestial King asked as she looked around. Quite a while had passed, so why hadn't he appeared yet? The 6 of them had already challenged this formation together many times. The gap between them in strength was small, and it was usually the Celestial King in green who would reach this area first. Meanwhile, the Celestial King in black would be the 4th to reach this area. Now, however, to say nothing of arriving 4th, he still hadn't arrived even though the 5th person had already arrived long ago. Where was he? Could it be? The 5 Celestial Kings looked toward Ling Han in unison. Chapter 25:18, Passing the Formation. The Celestial King in black had harbored no positive feelings toward Ling Han. Everyone knew this. Now, Ling Han had appeared here, while the Celestial King in black was nowhere to be seen. What did this signify? The Celestial King in black had been killed? Gasp! If this were true, the information that it revealed was far too terrifying. Firstly, it was extremely difficult for Celestial Kings to kill fellow Celestial Kings. This was recognized by everyone. As long as the gap in cultivation level wasn't large, a Celestial King wouldn't be able to stop another Celestial King from fleeing. Secondly, how long had passed? Yet, a Celestial King had already been killed? To kill the Celestial King in black with such ease, just how overwhelming did Ling Han's battle prowess need to be? He had killed him in such a short amount of time, and he had more so stopped him from fleeing? With these thoughts in mind, the Celestial Kings couldn't help but feel uneasy. They were filled with apprehension. Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He didn't explain anything. He continued to gaze at the city gates before him, with the shards of the symbols floating around his mind. He attempted to piece them together. Strangely, however, no matter how hard he tried to commit these symbols to memory, they would slowly fade away with the passing of time. After just 2 hours, they completely vanished from his mind. He couldn't recall them no matter what. "Friend, this stage is about trying to piece some words together. You have to rearrange these shards into the correct words within a limited amount of time. If you're correct, you'll be invited into the city," the Plum Blossom Celestial King said. Ling Han grumbled in his mind. Who had come up with this stupid test? He nodded at the Plum Blossom Celestial King, expressing his thanks. The other Celestial Kings humphed in their minds upon seeing this. They were slightly displeased. Ling Han looked at the city gates again. Meanwhile, the Plum Blossom and the others also did the same thing, with all of them mulling over the shards. The words and symbols would change all the time, so it would be useless even if they had passed this stage before. They would still have to challenge it again. As such, it was also impossible to rely on fortune. Ling Han focused his full attention on the task this time. When the shards appeared in his mind, he didn't try to immediately piece them together. Instead, he started to analyze them first. After all, different words would definitely have slight differences. Sure enough, it wasn't long before he separated these shards into 20 different groups. He then multitasked, rearranging these 20 words at once. With his powerful divine sense, this was naturally no difficult task. A short while later, the 20 words lit up in unison. Very well, you have solved the puzzle. You now have the right to enter the city. Don't be too arrogant. Ling Han read this in his mind. Whoosh! A sheet of light swept over, immediately drawing him into the city. Pooh! The 5 celestial kings violently spluttered again. Their eyes were wide with shock and disbelief. He had solved the puzzle that quickly? His achievements will definitely be limitless, the celestial king in green said with emotion. The plum blossom celestial king suddenly faltered before saying, I've heard that Yang Zhishuan was defeated by a mysterious person before. In fact, this person ripped his battle armor apart with his bare hands. However, he hadn't even reached the celestial king tier yet. Before, I merely thought that this was a rumor. Now, however. It's that brat, the 4 celestial kings exclaimed in unison. With a shudder, Ling Han had already appeared in the city. However, this city was empty and desolate, with not a single person in sight. It was filled with a sense of gloominess and eeriness. However, Ling Han was unafraid as he strode forward. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps traveled over from in front of him, after which 2 figures appeared. They were both around 6 meters in height, and they both radiated with the luster of metal. Ling Han was slightly astonished. These were war soldiers. Crackle. The 2 war soldiers attacked in unison, shooting beams of red light from their eyes. These beams of light swept toward Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand to block the attacks, with the 4 beams of red light all landing on his hand. It burns. Ling Han was astonished. This wasn't the regulations of fire. Instead, it was a type of violent and chaotic energy that could cause even him to feel a burning sensation. This was simply incredible. It was no wonder that the foreign realm was feeling immense pressure from the dark inverse realm. In fact, they had even been forced to create a battle beast such as Little Terror. This was because of the overwhelming power of war soldiers. Moreover, unlike celestial kings, these war soldiers could be mass-produced. Once they reached a certain number, they would indeed become terrifying. Explode! Ling Han roared. Boom! His voice transformed into a shock wave. Pang, pang! The 2 war soldiers were instantly blasted into smithereens, unable to withstand his crushing 5th heaven battle prowess. Ling Han continued to crush all opponents in his way, quickly making it out of the city. What appeared before him was a large river. Again, he was unable to fly across this river. There was some kind of mysterious power in the air that would strike him down with thunder if he attempted to. Meanwhile, numerous rocks would float to the surface of the river from time to time. However, there was seemingly no pattern to when they appeared or disappeared. Ling Han understood that he needed to cross the river by using these stones as platforms. The length of my strides will clearly be limited as well. Anyhow, let me have a try first, Ling Han said to himself. He jumped onto the first stone. Unleashing his full power, he then leaped toward another. Plop! He immediately fell into the water. With a boom, the roaring river directly washed him downstream. It took him 15 minutes to run back to the starting point. It was clear that there was no limit on how many times he could fail. However, if one wanted to make it onto the ranking list with the other supreme prodigies, they naturally couldn't fail even once. Ling Han stood still, observing the changes in the stones and analyzing the patterns of their appearance. After one day, he finally stepped forward again. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. He leaped across the stones, crossing the river in a single breath. He glanced back before continuing to advance. A short while later, a gate appeared before him. This wasn't another test. Instead, this was the gate of the world's paramount martial academy. He had passed the 9 Deaths formation, or rather its first level. A person flew out from the gate. It was a middle-aged man who had 3 ribbons of iridescent light around him. He looked at Ling Han, and said, "Congratulations on passing the 9 Deaths formation. From now on, you're a proper disciple of the academy. Dare I ask for your name?" Ling Han pondered for a brief moment before replying, "Zhang San." The middle-aged man's expression involuntarily froze. "Even if you don't want to reveal your identity, can you please put in some effort and think of a more normal name? It doesn't require that much brain juice, does it? Is it really alright for you to act like this?" "Friend Zhang San, do you want to challenge the second level of the 9 Deaths formation?" the middle-aged man asked with a smile. "Only after passing the second level can you leave your name on the Eternal Stone." He pointed to the row of 8 stone tablets beside him, all of which were dotted with names. Ling Han looked toward the first stone tablet. These were the 100 people who had passed the second level in the quickest time. The first name that jumped out at him was Lin Xiaoyang. Lord Lin Xiaoyang is the eldest son of heavenly venerate Lin Luo, the middle-aged man said with respect and reverence. Lord Lin Xiaoyang's cultivation talent isn't astounding, yet he's a person who is much wiser than he appears. Moreover, he's also a prodigy who bloomed later, with each of his footsteps solid and sturdy. Right now, he's already a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. A thought occurred to Ling Han. Lin Luo was Zhou Heng's master, and he was more so a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. This branch was far too freakish. Not only was the father a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, but even his son and disciple were 6th-tier heavenly venerates. This was truly something to envy. He looked down, and the second name that appeared was Han Yeyun. After that was Lu Ziyu. The middle-aged man continued to introduce them, saying, "Lord Han Yeyun, Lord Lu Ziyu, Lord An Feiyu, and Lord Long Yenyun are all prodigies from several epochs ago. As of now, they've all become heavenly venerates. 6th was Guang He, and 7th was Amu." Ling Han's pupils contracted. He had heard of this person before. He was a freak among freaks. Chapter 25:19, Second Level. Amu was a supreme prodigy for the ages. He was ranked 7th on the stone tablet. However, this was only the ranking list for the second level of the 9 Deaths formation, so it didn't signify that he was the 7th strongest out of all those who had passed this formation before. Even so, such a high ranking was a reflection of his freakish abilities. Ling Han was more curious about why Wally wasn't ranked among the top few people. Oh, right. Even though his analysis ability was number 1 in the world, peerless among all people, engaging in fights wasn't his strong suit. Thus, passing levels that pertain to calculations and analysis would be extremely easy for Wally. However, if he needed to battle, he would need to exert much more effort. Ling Han looked further down. In 8th place was Du Shi, another supreme prodigy of the current generation. In 9th place was Heavenborn. With Heavenborn's ability, he only managed to rank 9th. It could be said that Heavenborn was the culmination and embodiment of an entire dimension's essence. Thus, he would be no less freakish than Wally. No, he was most likely even more freakish than Wally. After all, the latter had still been created by humans. Meanwhile, Heavenborn was formed by the celestial realm itself. Where had Heavenborn been inferior? Was it in battle, or was it in analysis and predictions? Ling Han believed that it was the latter. After all, in terms of battle, Heavenborn's physique was far too powerful. His body was equivalent to divine metal, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to challenge all 9 levels of the 9 Deaths formation. Even if he couldn't defeat his opponents, he could still flee with ease. Thus, he had definitely been beaten in terms of analytical ability. Even so, the fact that he had made it onto the Eternal Stone proved that his abilities had surpassed those of the countless people before him. However, there were still those who could suppress him. Moreover, some of them belonged to the same generation. In other words, Heavenborn was still slightly inferior in this area. Even though he was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, there were still limits to his abilities. Ling Han nodded in his mind. He became even more confident that he could defeat Heavenborn. This was certainly not an invincible and insurmountable opponent. Ling Han continued to look down. In 10th place was Huaferong. This was as expected of the number 1 celestial maiden of the ages. Even here, she was still as impressive as always. Looking further down, Ji Wuming was ranked 29th, while the Rain Emperor was ranked 79th. Even though this seemed low, one had to realize that being able to make it onto the Eternal Stone was already an impressive feat in itself. Where's the Empress and Hunyo? Were they not powerful enough, or was it because of some other reason? Ling Han felt like both explanations were possible. Even though the Empress and Hunyo were also monarch stars, their evolution indices had only been around 10. It wasn't all that high. In this academy, however, there were freaks who possessed evolution indices of close to 12. Trying to surpass these freaks would naturally be a challenge. Moreover, with the Empress' proud nature, perhaps she would find it beneath her to compete with others anyway. Hunyo was more so unreliable when it came to these matters. It was entirely possible that she was uninterested in these rankings. He swept his gaze around. However, before he could even look toward the second stone tablet, several people walked out from the academy gates. Heavenborn. His pupils instantly contracted. The person in the lead was none other than Heavenborn. There were already 5 ribbons of iridescent light around him, and he was like a revered leader surrounded by underlings as a dozen or so people followed behind him. Each of them was a celestial king, surrounded by 1 to 5 ribbons of iridescent light. Lord Heavenborn is going to challenge the 9 Deaths formation again. This time, perhaps Lord Heavenborn will break Lord Du's record. The celestial kings conversed among themselves as they walked, completely ignoring Ling Han and the middle-aged man. Perhaps they simply viewed them as a celestial king with his follower. As always, Heavenborn possessed a formidable aura. It was as if his body contained a primordial beast, with each of his steps causing the earth to shudder. He entered from the location of the 4th stone tablet, with his body immediately vanishing without a trace. Here, each stone tablet rested in front of the corresponding level of the 9 Deaths formation. For example, the first stone tablet corresponded to the second level of the 9 Deaths formation. Meanwhile, the 4th stone tablet corresponded to the 5th level of the 9 Deaths formation. Right now, Heavenborn was already a 5th heaven celestial king, so he was also going to challenge the 5th level of the formation. He didn't plan to improve his results in the previous levels. Ling Han swept his gaze over the remaining stone tablets. The names on these tablets were quite different. For example, Lin Xiaoyang's name was nowhere to be seen. However, with the ability to become a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, would he not have the ability to leave his name on these stone tablets? It was clear that he hadn't wasted any of his time or effort here. Or perhaps he had left his name here before, yet he had erased it afterward for one reason or another. Meanwhile, Heavenborn's name appeared on each of the first 4 tablets. On the first 3 stone tablets, he was ranked from 9th to 10th on each one. On the 4th stone tablet, however, he was only ranked 19th. Was this because Heavenborn's power suddenly became insufficient? This was naturally not the case. This was because Du Shi was only ranked 18th, while Amu was only ranked 17th. Ling Han pondered over the possible reasons. For example, it would definitely be extremely easy for him to pass the second level of the 9 Deaths formation. This was because his true battle prowess had already reached the 5th heaven. This was a crushing advantage. In this sense, his results would naturally be better than if his battle prowess were only at the 2nd heaven. This was without a doubt. This was most likely the same situation for Heavenborn. For the first 3 levels, he had passed them by relying on the crushing advantage of his cultivation level. However, upon reaching the 5th level, he would no longer enjoy an advantage in terms of cultivation level. Thus, his results naturally declined. In some sense, Heavenborn's battle prowess while at the 5th heaven could only be ranked 19th out of everyone in history. Moreover, this was only among those who had decided to earnestly challenge this formation. Perhaps there were some prodigies who kept an extremely low profile, and didn't try to create any records at all. For example, Lin Luo. He was a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, yet his name didn't appear on any of the stone tablets. The same could be said for Zhou Heng and Chu Hao. Ling Han looked at the middle-aged man with a smile, and said, "I still haven't asked for your esteemed name." Ouyang Ming, the middle-aged man replied with a smile. Ling Han looked at the first stone tablet and said, "Please wait for a moment. I also want to try my hand at this formation." "Please go ahead," Ouyang Ming said, gesturing in invitation. He was also extremely curious about how prodigious Ling Han was. This would also dictate how he treated him in the future. Ling Han entered the 9 Deaths formation from the location of the first stone tablet. His surroundings didn't appear to change at all. However, after taking a few steps, a wooden puppet suddenly appeared before him. This was identical to the situation in the first level. Boom! The wooden puppet immediately charged over, throwing a punch. Symbols lit up, and it was clear that it had a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 2nd heaven. This was the 2nd level of the formation, so all of the challenges were designed with 2nd heaven celestial kings in mind. Ling Han attacked, easily defeating his opponent. After several more battles, he appeared before an expanse of fog. Sure enough, this was identical to the first level. The only difference was that the opponents were more powerful. He entered the fog, immediately inviting attacks from powerful enemies. Their battle prowess was slightly stronger, and perhaps even ordinary emperor tiers would be unable to rival them. Ling Han advanced with confidence. These opponents were merely small fry to him. After a short while, he arrived before a city that sat between 2 towering mountains. This was again identical to the first level. He had to rearrange these shards into words. He looked toward the city gates. Boom! Countless shards surged into his mind, greater in number and more chaotic in manner. Sure enough, it was much more difficult than before. Like before, Ling Han first separated these shards into groups. After sorting them into over 40 groups, he then rearranged them all at once. After 15 or so minutes, he suddenly opened his eyes. Numerous complete symbols pulsated in his eyes. This time, it wasn't words that had been formed. Instead, these were symbols of the Great Tao. This was extremely mysterious. Symbols of the Great Tao could actually be used like this? Whoosh! He was swept into the city. However, the symbols of the Great Tao didn't vanish. At this moment, Ling Han suddenly started to hesitate. Should he continue to advance, or should he stop to investigate these symbols? He had a feeling that these symbols were extraordinary. After a brief moment of hesitation, Ling Han eventually decided to sit down. Compared to strength, mere reputation was worth nothing. Chapter 25-20, 8th. Ling Han sat down, completely focused as he pondered the symbols of the Great Tao. He was in no hurry to pass this formation. After all, this was a rare opportunity for him to comprehend these symbols of the Great Tao. However, if he wanted to challenge this formation, he could do so at any time. After at least 3 days, Ling Han finally stood up in satisfaction. He had reaped huge benefits this time. These symbols of the Great Tao had most likely been gathered and formed by the magnificent power of heavenly Venerates. To a third heaven celestial king such as him, they were indescribably useful and beneficial. It was no wonder that some prodigies hadn't made it onto the Eternal Stone. It was because they had been distracted here, spending a great deal of time comprehending these symbols of the Great Tao. The gap between these prodigies was already small to begin with, so could they afford to waste 3 days here? Even though there was no explicit rule or explanation, Ling Han had a feeling that each person would only have a single chance to comprehend these symbols. Such rare opportunities could only come through fortune, not through searching. Ling Han pondered for a moment. Should he challenge this formation again? Making a conscious effort to achieve a higher ranking was not something that he liked. However, in order to suppress Heavenborn, he was willing to challenge this level again. He strode forward, easily breezing through the war soldiers that stood before him. War soldiers at the second heaven naturally couldn't slow him down. He arrived before the large river again. Just like before, stone platforms bobbed up and down, with their speed incredibly astonishing. There was even less of a pattern this time, and this gave Ling Han a huge headache. After an entire day, he finally made sense of the patterns behind the movements. He immediately leaped forward. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. In just a few dozen jumps, he arrived on the other side of the river. After arriving here, he had essentially passed the 9 Deaths formation already. Sure enough, after walking for a short while, a stone tablet appeared before him again. Surprisingly, this was exactly where he had entered the formation from. "Congratulations on passing the 2nd level," Ouyang Ming said. He was still standing in the same spot, and a smile spread across his face when he saw Ling Han arrive. Even though Ling Han's result was unable to win him a spot on the Eternal Stone, just his ability to pass the 2nd level alone was already outstanding. At the very least, it deserved his respect. "Follow me, I'll bring you to your residence," he said. However, Ling Han waved his hand, and said, "I want to challenge this level again." Ouyang Ming frowned upon hearing this. What was the hurry? Moreover, Ling Han had only just passed the level, so how much could his result improve if he immediately challenged it again? In any case, he had spent 4 entire days to pass the level, a time far inferior to what was needed to enter the rankings. The others all waited for several years before challenging the formation again, raising their power to a peak state. With Ling Han's request, not only would his result not improve, but it might even decline. However, since Ling Han insisted, there would be no point for Ouyang Ming to object. "Alright, I'll wait for you," he said. Ling Han smiled before entering the 2nd level again. There was nothing much to say about the early challenges. He simply steamrolled them with his crushing power. After arriving before the city gates, he unleashed all of his power. If he wanted to defeat Heavenborn, he wouldn't be able to do so in the stages that involved battle. His only chance to defeat Heavenborn was in terms of comprehension and analytical ability. Meanwhile, Ling Han was extremely confident in these areas. After a short while, Ling Han successfully rearranged the 40 words. This time, they were genuine words and not symbols of the Great Tao. He was drawn into the city, where he immediately unleashed his ferocious power. Pang, pang, pang. His fists were invincible, and he bulldozed through the war soldiers before arriving at the large river. Even though this was still the 2nd level, the patterns of the bobbling rock platforms changed again. Ling Han took another day to comprehend the mysterious patterns of their movement. He immediately bounded forward. "Xiao, Xiao. In a few bounds, he arrived on the opposite bank. He then strode forward. When he exited the formation, he coincidentally saw Heavenborn also walking out from behind the fourth stone tablet. His brows were furrowed, and it was clear that he was extremely displeased. It was evident that he hadn't achieved any breakthroughs in his result. Thus, he was naturally extremely displeased. Friend. Yang Ming stammered as he walked over. His voice was quivering. Ling Han looked over. What was he so astonished about? Congratulations, friend. You've made it into the rankings. Yang Ming finally said. He could finally form a proper sentence again. He was truly unable to fathom how Ling Han's results had improved by so much. Last time, it had taken Ling Han 4 entire days to pass the level. This time, however, he had directly made it into the rankings. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement. He knew that he would definitely make it into the rankings. However, the most important thing was where he ranked. Where did I rank? He asked. 8th. Yang Ming replied. This result was far too terrifying. In terms of the prodigies who were still at the Martial Academy, only AMU had achieved a better result than this. Du Shi, Heavenborn, Hua Furong, and the others had all been pushed down the ranking. 8th. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Even though he hadn't performed to the best of his potential, he was still slightly disappointed that he had only ranked 8th. In his mind, it should have been fairly easy to challenge the top 5 positions. Now, however, the gap between them was still fairly large. However, upon further thought, he immediately felt at ease. At the end of the day, the celestial realm was only a super low-level dimension. Moreover, his evolution index was only 11, perhaps slightly higher. However, it definitely hadn't reached 12. That being the case, was it strange that his result was inferior to those freaks' results? Instead, this caused his fighting spirit to soar. He decided to compete with those freaks in the 3rd level after he fully recovered his cultivation. After all, this result was because of his crushing advantage in cultivation level. It didn't reflect his true abilities. This was evident by looking at the 5th level. AMU, Heavenborn, and the others were all ranked around 20th. Heavenborn had already turned around to leave, yet upon hearing Yang Ming's reply, he violently turned around. 8th? Then wouldn't he be pushed down? He swept his gaze over. Sure enough, his name had fallen from 9th to 10th. Displeasure instantly spread across Heavenborn's face. This was because he detested the feeling of being inferior to others. It was also because of this that he challenged this formation time and time again. He yearned to surpass everyone above him. Now, however, he had actually been suppressed by a new disciple. This ticked him off immensely. However, he immediately humphed before turning around to leave. This was only the 2nd level, after all. Thus, many people suppressed their cultivation level to challenge this formation. Even though their battle prowess would be suppressed, their divine sense wouldn't be affected at all. Thus, they would possess a huge advantage when it came to rearranging the words and crossing the river. Ling Han's cultivation level was unclear, so it was evident that he had concealed it on purpose. Perhaps he was a 9th heaven celestial king. Thus, Heavenborn felt he needed not pay any heed to this. The only people who could grab his attention were the Martial Academy's AMU, Du Shi, and so on. These were all prodigies who possessed evolution indices of 12 or above. As for these lowly cultivators who didn't even dare to show their cultivation or face, it was beneath him to pay any attention to them. Meanwhile, Ling Han gazed at Heavenborn's leaving figure. In the near future, he would defeat this person in a fair and square battle, not just through this kind of meaningless method. Friend Zhang, you're truly outstanding. Yang Ming said in praise. Regardless of whether he was a high-level celestial king or not, his ability to enter the rankings alone was already a reflection of his boundless talent. Toward this kind of person, he didn't need to simply become associated with them. Instead, he needed to curry favor with and toed up to them. Ouyang Ming brought Ling Han into the academy. This was an endless mountain range that looked like an entire world. Even with Ling Han's powerful vision, he still couldn't see the end. Under Ouyang Ming's arrangement, he received an abode that was rich with spiritual qi. This was a holy land for cultivation. After sending off Ouyang Ming, Ling Han took out the cauldron that he had purchased not long ago. He planned to test its ability to refine alchemical pills. Chapter 25-21, Returning to the Third Heaven. The most special thing about this cauldron was its sturdiness. However, a good pill refinement cauldron needed more than just sturdiness. It also needed a powerful ability to resist flames. This was especially the case when it came to refining Celestial King tier pills. To refine such pills, one would need to use flames extracted from the Great Tao of Fire. Even divine metal would be slowly melted by such flames. Divine metal was sturdy, yet this didn't represent that it couldn't be damaged. It was just that it couldn't be comprehensively destroyed. Ling Han's comprehension of the Great Tao of Fire wasn't deep, but he had still developed a sliver of understanding because he had refined a piece of divine metal before. He immediately summoned the Great Tao of Fire to burn the cauldron. To his surprise, the cauldron didn't show any signs of softening even though it quickly became bright red. It was extremely resistant to flames. Upon further thought, Ling Han speculated that this was because some kind of peculiar clay had been added to the materials used in the making of this cauldron. Clay was far more resistant to flames than metal, so by mixing the two together, the resulting cauldron would naturally possess powerful resistance to flames. Of course, this couldn't be achieved with ordinary clay, nor could it be achieved with ordinary metal. In my view, this metal is most likely derived from the impurities produced in the process of purifying divine metal. Thus, it doesn't possess the intensity and murderous aura of divine metal, but its sturdiness can almost rival that of divine metal. The difference is that divine metal has the ability to regenerate itself, while this metal most likely doesn't. It's genuinely sturdy, but once it's damaged, it's genuinely damaged as well. Even after fixing it, there will still be imperfections. This is unlike divine metal, which is whole to begin with. As if it possesses life, it possesses the ability to heal and regenerate. However, to me, this cauldron is indeed very useful. I finally have a high-quality pill refinement cauldron. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. Right now, he naturally needed to refine Celestial King tier pills. Thus, his requirements for the necessary cauldron were also extremely strict. Otherwise, what would he do if the cauldron melted halfway through the pill refinement process? For example, refining the Celestial King pills had given him a massive headache. He put the cauldron aside. He then started to cultivate in seclusion, keeping an extremely low profile. This was even though countless people wanted to visit him. After all, regardless of how he had achieved it, his ability to enter the rankings proved a single point: his talent was lofty and boundless. Such a person was naturally worth buttering up to. However, Ling Han was in no mood to make new friends. Right now, his goal was to improve his cultivation. To say nothing of advancing to the fourth heaven, he at least had to return to the third heaven no matter what. He activated the full power of his physique. He then activated the regulations of time, accelerating time and increasing the speed of his cultivation. This was a transcendent dimension, so not only were there more regulations, but they were also more powerful. Indeed, even monarch-tier celestial kings from the celestial realm might be defeated by ordinary celestial kings from this realm. Thus, Ling Han wasn't simply undergoing a process of recultivation. At the same time, he was also improving his grasp of the regulations. The days passed one by one. Meanwhile, Ling Han's cultivation level also continued to rise. Each year, the Martial Academy would distribute an astonishing amount of cultivation resources. This was the only transcendent dimension in the Genesis world, so it naturally possessed an astonishingly rich amount of cultivation resources. Now that all of these resources had been gathered together, there was naturally enough to support the wild and fervent cultivation of these supreme prodigies. Ling Han naturally didn't use any of these resources. After all, he was still far from reaching the Celestial King tier. There was no hurry. In any case, these resources wouldn't go to waste. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Before long, 7,000 years had already passed. To celestial kings, even though 7,000 years was more than just the blink of an eye, it was still an insignificant and short moment compared to their exorbitantly long lifespan. The world's paramount martial academy didn't experience any exciting incidents either. Even though one or two more people had passed the 9 deaths formation, becoming proper disciples of the martial academy, they hadn't been anywhere near as freakish as Ling Han. Thus, they naturally hadn't caused a ripple. Meanwhile, Ling Han had kept an extremely low profile this entire time, not showing himself once in the 7,000 years. As such, even though he had caused a huge commotion before, he was also gradually forgotten. Some people speculated that he had used some kind of peculiar technique to pass the formation, perhaps even exhausting his life force. It was because of this that he had achieved such an outstanding result. At the same time, it was also because of this that he had been recuperating all these years. Otherwise, why would he not show himself after achieving such an outstanding feat? If Ling Han exited seclusion at this moment and revealed his true identity, he could definitely still cause a huge commotion. However, if he didn't reveal his identity, perhaps not a single person would recognize him. It was at this moment that Ling Han finally concluded his seclusion. Third Heaven Celestial King. He had finally returned to his original cultivation level. Moreover, he had become even more powerful. However, even though I've become more powerful, the others have also grown more powerful as well. I don't possess any advantage. On the contrary, even though my power of regulations has improved, my body art hasn't seen any improvement at all. In reality, my advantage has been weakened, Ling Han murmured to himself. However, he wasn't disappointed in the least. This was because he was filled with confidence. He was more so filled with fighting spirit. Having competition was always good. Prodigies from countless dimensions are all gathered here, so perhaps there are some people who are keeping an extremely low profile. As such, there are most likely far more elites than those who appear on the Eternal Stone. I truly want to head out for a battle. Ling Han stood up. He had already rested for long enough. It was time to go out for a stroll. He first had a hearty gathering with his wives in the spatial celestial tool, after which he collected all of the cultivation resources that he had been given. He then left his abode, and casually strolled through the mountains. After arriving at the waist of the mountain, he saw that there was a library located here. He walked inside for a look. This library wasn't filled with ancient books, and it housed numerous jade seals instead. As long as one released their divine sense to make contact with a jade seal, they could construct a channel through which the information from the jade seal would travel through. This was extremely convenient and fast. Moreover, these jade seals could also become vessels that could host the divine senses of many people at once, allowing them to communicate and discuss their comprehensions. This was incredibly mysterious and wonderful. According to rumors, this process had been implemented after studying the technology of some technologically advanced dimensions. This library was extremely large, and it more so held countless jade seals. There were also dedicated rooms that only held a single jade seal, and many more people would be standing around these. It was due to the popularity of these jade seals that they had been placed into dedicated rooms. Ling Han walked up to the first jade seal that he encountered in the library. This was the largest jade seal, yet it didn't possess any cultivation technique or whatnot. Instead, this was a directory and catalog for the library. He scanned through the information. This library truly contained everything. There were jade seals about astrology, geography, history, pill refinement, tool refinement, and so on. Of course, there were even more on cultivation techniques, with many of them powerful enough to be regarded as paramount mystical powers in the celestial realm. Even ninth heaven celestial king forces would fight to the death over them. Here, however, they were available for everyone to learn. Of course, this only applied to the disciples of the Martial Academy. To call itself the world's paramount, this academy was indeed powerful and domineering. Even celestial king tier secret techniques were freely available for everyone to study. A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han. Right now, only his fists of fury could be regarded as a self-created technique. However, all of his other techniques had been learned from other people. This was far too inferior. If he wanted to become a heavenly venerate, he would need to forge a unique path for himself. He would elevate the level of his fists of fury first. In fact, this was a technique that he had created while he was still at the dividing soul tier. Now, however, he was already at the celestial king tier. Thus, he naturally needed to refine and improve it. However, could he refine and improve it just because he wanted to? He walked over to the fist technique section. There were countless secret techniques regarding fists here, and Ling Han greedily used his divine sense to absorb all of this information. However, he didn't practice these techniques. Instead, he simply consulted them and used them as references. He was going to take the advantages of each and then combine them with his own comprehension. Right now, he was simply absorbing this information. Brother Ding, are you going to the prospective partner ceremony? Chapter 25-22, Off to Defend My Wife. Prospective partner ceremony? Are you talking about that drinking party hosted by Xianing? When did it become a prospective partner ceremony? Oh, I heard the members of the Martial Academy say that this drinking party would be called a conference of cultivation, but in truth, it is a prospective partner ceremony. There is a mighty figure in the Martial Academy that thinks that everyone should not just be focused on cultivation, and should find some time to find a partner as well. That's true. We people are too excellent. Previously, we have concentrated fully on cultivation, and did not have the idle time to be concerned about any romantic affairs. By now, ordinary women would not be worthy of our notice at all, and probably only the empresses here would be worthy of us. Brother Ding, let me tell you. Even Goddess Luan Xing would be going. What, Goddess Luan Xing is also going? Of course. Because of her, a few extraordinary beings would also appear at the same time, such as Gu Hui, Xiaoxiong, Miao Hua. Hiss, these monsters? The sound of the conversation between the two transmitted continuously, allowing Ling Han to grasp it. It could not be helped. The jade seal was a container, and whoever sent out a message through divine sense would be heard by others who had contact with the jade seal. Originally, this was meant to make it convenient for others to share ideas, and was not supposed to be used for idle conversation. A thought flashed across Ling Han's mind: the Empress would be attending the prospective partner ceremony? He could not believe the Empress would do such a thing even if it killed him. Even if he really had died, with how proud the Empress was, she would not deign to go, either. She was the type to have men kneel down and look up at her while she slowly made her choice. The Empress was probably kept in the dark. Her main reason for attending this drinking party was for the sake of discussing cultivation. Then he could only go and take a look for himself. Otherwise, what was he to do if someone snatched his wife? Those two people were just talking about the drinking party when the direction of their conversation naturally turned towards the beauties of the Martial Academy. Because the Martial Academy had existed for a number of epochs, even if there were slightly fewer female prodigies, after so many years, a great many female prodigies had also been accumulated, and there would naturally be exquisite beauties among them. An extremely small number of them advanced to become heavenly venerates, but the majority had only progressed until the 9th heaven celestial king tier. There were some among them that were still cultivating in the martial academy, and some that were traveling all around, looking for opportunities that would allow them to break through to that cultivation level which they yearned for. There was also a ranking of beauties in the martial academy that had listed the most beautiful women throughout the ages. In fact, there were even other time-differentiated ranking lists, with a range of 10 billion years. Actually, it was also the same for male prodigies. Only a rare few had become heavenly venerates, and the majority was still stagnating on the level of 9th heaven. The men also had rankings, but what was being considered was naturally not their looks, but rather strength. For example, in the latest ranking of strength, the one at the very top was not heaven-born, but rather Guhui, Xiaofan, and the others. They were already in the 6th heaven. To be accepted as students by the martial academy, they would have to be monarch tiers at least, and those that could be ranked in the upper echelons were even more likely to be monarch stars. In fact, they would have to be freaks with evolution index that reached 11 or 12. Guhui, Xiaofan, and Miao Hua were such freaks that even heaven-born had no choice but be ranked inferior to them. Of course, this was because they had suppression through their superior cultivation level, and in terms of a real battle of equals, it was definitely heaven-born that was stronger, or he would not have ranked so highly on the Eternal Stone. It should be known that the names of Xiaofan and the others were not ranked on it. It was also possible that they could not be bothered with this kind of ranking. Ling Han developed some understanding. All in all, the pressure on him now was very heavy. Even if there weren't 10,000 people that desired his wife, there had to be 8,000. Furthermore, they were all the super geniuses of the martial academy. Right, off to defend my wife, Ling Han thought as he continued to pluck the essence of various fist techniques. A day later, he left the library, and returned to his accommodations, where he began to meld these fist techniques together. While his ability of deduction could not be compared to Wally's, it was definitely in the highest tier. With the time acceleration effects, boundless enlightenment rose up inside him. However, after 2 days had passed in real time, he had no choice but to stop. The drinking party was about to begin. He changed his clothes so he would appear more alert. However, he naturally would not be showing his real appearance. He was sure that the empress, Hunyo, and the others would still be able to recognize him, even if it had been 1,000,000 years since they parted. He looked again and again at the mirror, and when he felt he was handsome enough, he pushed open the doors and left. When the two people from before had conversed, Ling Han had also found out where this drinking party would be held. Thus, he headed there directly after he exited from his place. The drinking party was hosted by a person called Xianing. He was a veteran prodigy, and going by the time-different rankings of 100 million years, he was someone from the last 2 generations, and had long since reached the 9th heaven celestial king tier. There were not many students that did not leave after attaining 9th heaven. That was because the majority would follow heavenly venerates to battle with hysteria outside the realm. Though they would only be minor characters, and it would be extremely dangerous, the possibility of gaining enlightenment in such extremely dangerous circumstances would also be slightly higher. It could be said that the majority of heavenly venerates had broken through in the realm battlefield. Actually, Xianing had also gone to the realm battlefield before, and had now come back for a rest. While he was at it, he had taken heed of the idea of some powerful figure in the martial academy, and decided to host a drinking party so he could get to know these little brothers and sisters, and fill them in on the cruelties of the realm battlefield. His abode was located midway on a peak. Though it was also in the martial academy, there really was a far distance. Even if Ling Han raced madly with all his might, he would only be able to arrive after probably 2 hours, at least. Tap, 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 a sound rang out from behind him. Ling Han was surprised. Though he was not running at full speed, his speed was already overwhelming, and someone actually managed to catch up to him. He turned his head, and saw that it was a carriage that was nearing him quickly, and it was actually being pulled by a dragon. Dragons were the strongest of immortal beasts. They were incredibly powerful creatures, and it was said that they could become celestial kings upon birth. With merely this fact alone, what other race could compare in this world? Hence, dragons were also extremely proud beings. Ling Han had never seen celestial-level dragons in the celestial realm before, because the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable had turned the ancestor dragon into a precious tool, while other dragons had basically perished in the war against the invasion of the foreign realm. Similarly, it was the same for the Phoenix race as well. The ancestor Phoenix had similarly died in the hands of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. This was his first time seeing a great celestial king-tier dragon, but it was actually playing the role of steed. This caused Ling Han some amount of surprise. Xiao, the dragon soared past, and the carriage also passed him by. The body of the carriage was heavily covered with seals. Clearly, this was no ordinary item either. Otherwise, how could it be able to sustain this kind of speed? It would have long since broken apart. Idiot, come on and chase me. A head stuck itself out of the carriage window, yelling at Ling Han in provocation. Originally, Ling Han would not have taken it to heart even if he had been surpassed. He would only muse ruefully how his first encounter with a great celestial king-tier dragon would actually be like this, yet he had not expected that he would be mocked even when he was just going his own way. The other party was a man, and he was very young. He laughed loudly, and when he said his piece, he sat back down in his carriage. The inner space in the carriage was very lavish, with thick carpets laid out on the floor. Aside from him, there was another purple-robed young man that was sipping wine. Seeing that he had withdrawn his head, this person held the stem of the wine cup gingerly, and asked calmly, "Young Master Zhua, is this really good? What's bad about it?" A mere third heaven celestial king that does not even have a means of transport, what kind of important person could he be? This man countered. His name was Zhua Kai, and he had a prestigious identity. His grandfather was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Though it did have the attachment of the word pseudo, so he had not advanced into the invincible cultivation level, as long as there was the slightest link to heavenly venerable tier, could that not be awesome enough? Thus, Zhua Kai was naturally arrogant. The purple-robed young man was just about to speak when he spluttered out all the wine in his mouth with a sudden "Pu." Chapter 25-23, Sorting Him Out. What's wrong with you? Zhua Kai laughed loudly. For a great third heaven celestial king to actually look so embarrassing, this was really too funny. The purple-robed young man coughed continuously, and could not even speak. He merely pointed a finger behind Zhua Kai's back. Zhua Kai was curious, and turned his head. Instantly, he felt a chill rise up his spine as he almost called out in spite of himself. A face had suddenly appeared at the window of the carriage. Who else could it be but the person he had previously mocked? He had to be seeing things, the other party actually caught up to them so soundlessly. Was he planning to scare them to death? Moreover, the carriage was clearly still advancing at a rapid speed, yet this man could actually keep up with them. His speed was shockingly stable. Just what kind of monster was this? Country bumpkin, scram! Zhua Kai shouted loudly, feeling a slight burst of anger at his own embarrassment. He had actually gotten a scare. In the Flaming Frost realm, there were actually a great many people that felt great prejudice towards outsiders, and thought that it was they that had snatched away too many opportunities that originally should have been theirs. This was a very great conflict. If it weren't for the fact that there were a considerable number of powerful figures suppressing this conflict, it would probably have long since resulted in the outburst of an intense civil war. Zhua Kai was a local, and had never liked outsiders. That was why he had deliberately shown himself and thrown out a mocking remark when he had previously passed by Ling Han. At first, he had thought that Ling Han would definitely be no match for him in terms of speed, since he had been surpassed by the carriage. Who would have thought that that was not Ling Han's full speed at all? Ling Han humphed, and demanded, "Apologize." Actually, he was a very amicable person. If others did not trifle with him, he would not offend others of his own volition either. But who asked Shuo Kai to be so wretched, and insist on provoking him? Then he would show the other what his temper was like. Get lost. Shuo Kai calmed himself, and immediately waved out an arm, sending out a gust of power. He, too, was a third heaven celestial king. This strike was extremely shocking, and had terrifying might. Ling Han shot out a casual punch. Boom, this gust of power was instantly and incredibly easily obliterated. What? The purple-robed young man also paled in shock. He had not thought that Ling Han's strength would be so great. Hurriedly, he moved as well, and delivered a palm strike, aimed straight for Ling Han's shoulder. Xiao, Ling Han's figure disappeared from the window in a flash. Shuo Kai and his companion sighed in relief. What kind of person was this? Why was his strength so terrifying? Thankfully, they had managed to throw him off their tail in the end. It was at this very moment that they felt the carriage shudder, and then they were both thrown into the air. What's going on? Pang! The carriage fell onto the ground, releasing a massive bang. At the same time, a powerful impact also ensued. After all, at such a great speed, the carriage suddenly overturning would naturally cause a frighteningly strong impact. Pang, pang, pang. Shuo Kai and his companion were violently shaken inside the carriage. Thankfully, they were celestial kings, after all. As they channeled their regulations respectively, they both floated in midair, a protective layer of light wrapped around them resisting the force of the impact. After the carriage had stopped completely, they also pushed open the door of the carriage and walked out. Immediately, they got a scare because the great dragon that was playing the role of their steed was already lying on the ground, its claws facing skywards. A large bump had also risen on its head. Clearly, someone had knocked it out cold. The culprit was Ling Han. They saw a man that was standing right next to the carriage. His arms were crossed behind his back, exuding the air of a show-off. How dare you? Shuo Kai roared in fury. You dare to attack even my steed, are you tired of living? This was the pride of a local, they would always look down on outsiders. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. Just how ignorant was this guy? Hadn't he learned enough of his lesson? He still dared to be so arrogant? Rubbing his chin, Ling Han said, "Has anyone ever told you that you are ignorant?" The purple-robed young man nodded internally. He had known Shuo Kai for some time, and naturally knew that the latter was a little ignorant. Usually, he would make a lot of enemies, but in truth, it was all unnecessary. If it were not because Shuo Kai had an ancestor that was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, who knew how many times this brat would have been pummeled, and he might have long since died by now. Yet Shuo Kai did not have this kind of self-awareness at all. He was too proud. Because he had an ancestor that was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he considered everyone else below his notice. He humphed. Kneel down and apologize, or I will make you want to wish for death. Ling Han chuckled. This kind of idiot was really ignorant. Merely conversing with him was practically a humiliation to his own intelligence. He directly moved, stretching out a large hand, and seal after seal formed. After he had replenished himself with the regulations of the flaming frost realm, his battle prowess had already soared directly into the fifth Heaven 1, which was practically on the same level as his body art. Furthermore, his body art was also limited by his own cultivation level. As long as he had not yet advanced into the fourth heaven, he would only be limited to this extent. However, with the different regulations, he was still just at the early stage of the third heaven presently, and there was still space for improvement. Going by Ling Han's deductions, ultimately, his body art and power of regulation should be equal. The purple-robed young man and Zhuo Kai both rose up to counter him. The former was a monarch tier, but Zhuo Kai was only an emperor tier. The fact that he managed to enter into the martial academy was due to his ancestor, or there would be absolutely no possibility that he could appear here. That was the truth as well. It was his ancestor that had brought Zhuo Kai through the 9 Deaths formation, and Zhuo Kai had not gained the recognition of the martial academy. Thus, he did not have his own abode, nor did he have any cultivation resources issued by the martial academy. With his own power, he could not leave or enter. He was merely deceiving himself. What use would their counterattack be? The descent of Ling Han's hand was not obstructed at all. Peng, Zhuo Kai and his companion both trembled at the same time as they involuntarily threw up blood madly, feeling an agony that could not be described. Only now did Zhuo Kai and his companion know just what kind of hard rock they had crashed into, and they both couldn't help but turn pale. Ling Han stroked his chin. How should I deal with the two of you? There was a heavenly venerate standing guard here, so murder was definitely forbidden. There were some rules that had to be adhered to. And he'd do that? Then. Once Ling Han was really angered, he naturally would not be appeased so easily. He broke into a grin, and picked up both the purple-robed young man and Zhuo Kai at the same time. Then, with a burst of power, the clothing the two were wearing instantly turned into ash. Why you, what do you want to do? Both of them were stunned. Even if they were celestial kings, so what? They still broke out in a cold sweat in their terror. Ling Han's gaze was too evil, right? It couldn't be that he was the type of pervert that would be interested in raping men, right? Don't worry, don't worry. My tastes are not that hardcore, Ling Han replied, laughing. Zhuo Kai and his companion finally breathed a sigh of relief at this, but then they thought further. Hey, that's not right. If your tastes are not so hardcore, what are you taking our clothes off for? Ling Han first threw the purple-robed man onto the ground, then pushed Zhuo Kai onto him. At this, both celestial kings looked livid. Ling Han chuckled, and tapped a finger on a specific spot on each of their bodies. Ah! Zhuo Kai and his companion screamed at the same time, feeling as if their hearts had been ripped. Their agony could not be described, and even their bodies were twitching slightly. However, anyone who saw this scene would exclaim with an "oh" in understanding. Two men were doing something shameless, and were even shamelessly moaning and groaning in their lust. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. His skill in giving others a hard time seemed to have improved further. This was worth celebrating. He walked to the great dragon, and lightly patted the latter's head. A force reverberated out, and this great dragon was instantly awakened. When the great dragon regained consciousness, it couldn't help but be enraged upon spotting Ling Han. It was this guy that had blasted it to the ground. It knew that it was no match for Ling Han, and was about to complain to its master when it suddenly saw a scene that even it could not bear to witness. Oh, my poor draconic eyes! Chapter 25-24, Drinking Party. Your master is very busy, so it would be better for you to send me to the destination first. Ling Han laughed, and boarded the carriage. Though the great dragon had not taken human form, its intelligence was not the slightest bit low, so it naturally knew that Ling Han's strength had already surpassed its imagination. It made no move to resist, all obedient. With it releasing a dragon roar, its claws stepped onto air as it immediately sped forth like lightning. Ling Han lifted the curtain of the carriage window, and looked at the constantly changing scenery around him. He nodded internally. As expected, dragons were beings that were naturally born to rule the skies. The speed was truly astonishing. However, Ling Han looked closely at the few unique metal plates on the dragon's body. There were seals flickering and flashing light engraved on them. Instantly, he understood. Dragons were indeed fast, but their speed had not reached an extent that would shock him. Instead, those few metal plates, which were definitely precious tools, boosted the speed of the great dragon, which allowed it to be so fast. This was almost the speed of a full-out sprint from Ling Han. After more than an hour, Xian Ying's abode was already within sight. It was no problem even if Ling Han had never come here before, because there were too many carriages that were stationed outside this abode. The steeds that pulled these carriages varied greatly, but they were all at the Celestial King tier. There were peacocks, pheasants, giants, and of course, there were also pure humans. As long as one had enough strength, even an ant could be mighty and paramount, and when faced with an even stronger being, even a human Celestial King would fall to the level of a steed. With this thought, it was nothing too strange for a great Celestial King tier dragon to play the part of a steed. The large dragon stopped, and withdrew its aura. Though it was a dragon, and a Celestial King tier 1 at that, it did not have the slightest feeling of superiority here. If it dared to be arrogant, any single person here could easily slay a dragon. Cautiously, it sprawled out on the ground. It had been a servant for so long that it had forgotten the pride of a Celestial King. Isn't this Shuakai's dragon carriage? He, this profligate young master is here as well. With his personality, he would definitely offend those few female Celestial Kings today, right? He would only be pummeled at most. After all, he has a pseudo-heavenly venerate ancestor, and anyone would have to give his ancestor some face. Lord Zhuobing is a top-tier prodigy of our martial academy, and has also battled countless years in the realm battlefield, finally advancing to the ranks of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. He is only but half a step away from true transcendence. This lord is so heroic and mighty, but why would he have such an unworthy descendant? If a great son could be born every generation, then wouldn't the Flaming Frost realm belong to the Zhuo clan by then? Many people recognized Shuakai's dragon carriage. Clearly, this guy was extremely showy in the martial academy. His person had not even arrived yet, but he had already caused spirited discussions to rise up among the masses. Of course, all this discussion was negative. Two young men walked out and approached. They were Shuakai's friends, and both of them had a pseudo-heavenly venerate ancestor in their clans. One was named Wu Ju, and the other was Su Shan. Kai, why are you so late? Come out and take a look at the beauties. The two men called out from outside the carriage. Ling Han opened the carriage door and came out, causing the two men to exclaim in surprise. Because they did not spot Shuakai, they couldn't help but ask, "Where is Kai?" It was not that they were curious why there was another person sitting in Shuakai's carriage, because Shuakai loved to show off, would often befriend some prodigies so that he could boast everywhere in future. But where was Shuakai himself? Ling Han smiled, and replied, "Shuakai found something fun on our way here, and told me to inform you guys on his behalf so you could hurry and play there." Both Wu Ju and Su Shan were surprised. They knew Shuakai liked to play, but with how high the standard of the drinking party was, all the prodigies in the last 10 billion years had been invited, yet Shuakai had actually found somewhere even more enjoyable. Wu Ju couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" Though he was also a Celestial King, he had been forcefully pulled up to this level by the incredible might of a great elite. In the future, there would be practically no further room for him to improve. Thus, having fun was his primary mission. Ling Han put on an air of mystery, and made a hushing gesture. Then, placing his hand next to his mouth, he whispered, "It is extremely fun. That's why Shuakai asked you guys to go over." Seeing how mysterious Ling Han was acting, Wu Ju and Su Shan could not hold themselves back any longer, and hurriedly asked, "Where is it?" Ling Han related the detailed location, causing the dragon next to him to bare its teeth involuntarily. Ling Han was clearly trying to cause trouble. If others witnessed how Zhuo Kai was looking now, would he still have any face to see others in the future? Despicable, this was really too despicable. Yet the great dragon did not dare make a sound in the slightest. It pretended that it knew nothing. Having been on the receiving end of a punch from Ling Han, it was fully and completely intimidated. Wu Ju and the other man were both very intrigued. They knew very well what kind of person Zhuo Kai was. If that other activity was not incredibly fun, how could he bear to miss out on this kind of excitement, but rather play around elsewhere? They immediately summoned a carriage, and shot out according to where Ling Han had told them to go. They feared that Zhuo Kai would finish playing that fun thing, and nothing would be left for them. Ling Han chuckled, and jumped down from the carriage. Then, he walked towards the abode. He was only a third heaven celestial king. This kind of cultivation level was not very high. Furthermore, he had not shown his face much, so it was natural that no one knew how freakishly strong he was, and no one paid any special attention to him at all. After entering into the abode, he found himself in a completely different world. For a celestial king, creating a separate dimension was really too easy. Hence, this abode was also shockingly huge. The place they entered was a colossal plaza, and there were rows of tables set out in this plaza. Every row of tables was made up of over 100 separate tables joined together. White cloth was laid out on these tables, with meat dishes in one row, fruits in another, and the intervals were continuous. A great many people were walking around between the tables, taking some here and taking some there. It was just nice, anyone could pick up some meat and fruit anywhere they liked, which was very convenient. As they roamed around, they ate and socialized with others. Then, there would be servants passing to and fro between them to pour wine, which had a kind of unique charm. Though there were already several hundred people here, Ling Han only had to sweep a glance over the gathered masses, and he could confirm that the empress, Hunyo, and bewitching maiden Ro were not among them. Hence, he grabbed a plate, and roamed around himself. Very soon, he had accumulated a pile of food, and then walked to the side where he began to eat. There was no seating in the middle of the plaza, but there was all around. There were also tables available for them to place some things. However, there were not many people here, because this was a drinking party, which was meant as an opportunity for socializing. What do you mean by just eating at the side like this? Ling Han naturally would not be concerned. The food here was really quite good. Some meat jerky of great celestial king tier beasts was already delicious enough with just simple cooking, and if the skill of the chef was even better, it would be even more delectable. He was very engrossed in eating, and was completely unconcerned about the looks others were throwing at him. However, after wolfing down the food for some time, he still drew the attention of others. A young girl walked over, her arms crossed over her chest. Then, bending down, she had practically shoved her face right in front of Ling Han. Why are you eating here all by yourself? Because I like it, Ling Han answered nonchalantly. The taste of the food here was really quite good. Hunyo would like it. The young girl pouted. Glutton, she uttered disdainfully, then her keen interest returned once more, and she additionally asked, why are you not socializing with the others? Why should I? Ling Han countered. The young girl was surprised. Could it be that you don't know that this is a social gathering? Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Then why don't you join them either? There's no one good to socialize with, she sighed, looking very regretful. Chapter 25-25, Knowing How to Behave. Ling Han cracked a smile, pointed at himself, and asked, what do you think about me then? You? The young girl sized him up, then nodded, and offered her judgment. You have only cultivated for less than 1 billion years, yet are already a third heaven celestial king. Not bad, quite good. However, you are not my cup of tea. She spread her hands, her expression saying, "You're not my type at all." Ling Han naturally would not be offended. Though only over 1,000,000 years had passed for him in real time, if the time passed under time acceleration effects was taken into account as well, there were still a few 100,000,000 years at least. This young girl's judgment was quite accurate. He smiled slightly, and continued to eat. The young girl was now interested in him instead, and said, "You are quite interesting yourself. I said that about you, but you are not angry at all. Just for the sake of your good temper, I have decided to do you a good deed." "What is it? Do you want to save me from my poor bachelorhood?" Ling Han asked laughingly. "I have decided to introduce my big sister to you." Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This young girl was clearly the undependable type. Her big sister had to feel great pressure from having to deal with her antics. "What are you frowning for?" "My big sister is very pretty," the young girl declared proudly. "In the 100 Flowers scroll this time, my big sister is ranked 4th. There would always be people who were too idle, and would rank pretty women according to their respective beauty. There was an overall leaderboard. All female disciples of the Martial Academy would be encompassed within, but there were also secondary leaderboards aside from this overall leaderboard, and they were differentiated by 100,000,000 years each. Clearly, the young girl was talking about a secondary leaderboard. Where there was the Empress and Hunyo, her big sister could still claim 4th place. She should be very beautiful. Since she is so pretty, what need is there for you to be anxious? Ling Han asked, smiling. You don't understand, the young girl explained. Those damn men would definitely show their best side just to court my big sister. Even if it was just a pretense, they would have to act the part very well. I can't rest assured with that. Thus, I want to help big sister choose personally. You see, in front of me, you did not act at all, right? Ling Han couldn't help but break into laughter. Though the young girl was using a strange logic was still logic. Big sister will be coming later too. I will make introductions, and I guarantee that you will drool when you see her, the young girl boasted. Ling Han deliberately said, Really? I have always had very discriminating judgment. Unless she is as beautiful as Luan Xing, would not be charmed easily. You, the young girl pointed at Ling Han. Why was this guy so shameless? Who was Luan Xing? Not only was she the top place holder of the 100 Flowers scroll this time, even in the overall leaderboard, she would be considered one of the most beautiful too. The only person that could compete with her was Lin Yolian. But Lin Yolian had gone out on a training trip several epochs ago, and had never returned throughout all these years. Thus, Luan Xing's position as the top beauty could not be shaken at all. And you call this as having discriminating judgment? You are actually just shameless, aren't you? Humph, as I see it, you have not seen Luan Xing at all. You are merely going by exaggerated rumors, and can only imagine her supreme beauty in your mind. Let me tell you, if I don't tell you who's big sister, you will definitely think that she is more beautiful than Luan Xing, the young girl exclaimed defiantly. Chen Ziyu, don't just randomly play matchmaker. A voice suddenly rang out, interrupting their conversation. Ling Han looked over. This was a very tall young man, with 4 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him, an indescribable arrogance clear in his expression. Busybody, what do you care about what I do? The young girl humphed, crossing her arms over her chest. The young man showed a hint of displeasure. My name is Guan Dongyu 1. Don't be so fussy. It doesn't matter if there is a stroke less or a stroke more. The young girl, Chen Ziyu, spread out her hands. Guan Dongyu humphed. Celestial Maiden Qiuyun isn't your actual sister at all. What need is there for you to be concerned about her affairs? Busybody, you are really such a busybody. I want to concern myself, so what do you care? Chen Ziyu glared at him angrily. Damn girl, do you think that you can just do as you like because Celestial Maiden Qiuyun dotes on you? Guan Dongyu suddenly moved, grabbing out at Chen Ziyu. Ling Han shook his head. A man, and one who has an advantage in cultivation level, how can you bring yourself to bully a girl? He extended a hand as a block, and grabbed Guan Dongyu's wrist. Chen Ziyu was only a second heaven celestial king, and there was no way that she could block this blow from Guan Dongyu. Guan Dongyu couldn't help but feel surprised. A mere third heaven celestial king actually managed to block his attack. He humphed. You actually dare to interfere, he roared, his right hand suddenly exerting strength. Power of regulation blazed. He was going to crush Ling Han's hand. Yet his expression immediately changed drastically because his hand was actually completely motionless, and Ling Han was still holding it steadily with his own. A third heaven celestial king had got a hold of his hand, and he actually was unable to extract himself? This was too ridiculous. Could it be that the other had concealed his cultivation level? Impossible. Celestial kings could indeed conceal the peculiar light wrapped around themselves, but it would either have to be hiding it all, or leaving it completely exposed. There was no possible way that one could hide just one or two of those streaks of peculiar light and leave the others. Since Ling Han showed that he was wrapped by 3 streaks of peculiar light, that meant that he was a third heaven celestial king, genuine and completely truthful. Guan Dongyu's expression changed abruptly. There was only one possibility, then: Ling Han was a monarch star, or even more freakish than a monarch star, a monster whose evolution index reached 11 or even 12. I forfeit. Guan Dongyu said, knowing very well how he should behave in such a situation. If they really were to fight one another, not only would it not benefit him in the slightest, he would be embarrassed in full public as well. Ling Han nodded. Since the other knew how he should conduct himself, he thus released his grip. Guan Dongyu immediately turned around and left, not even bothering to participate in the drinking party any longer. Wow, so you are actually so strong. Chen Ziyu's eyes lit up. Ling Han smiled, and asked, have you fallen for me then? I already told you, you are not my type, Chen Ziyu said. Still, big sister likes your type, so your chances are greatly increased now. Ling Han was just about to say something when he saw a woman walk over with swaying hips. She looked very enchanting and graceful, with 2 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around her. She curtsied slightly towards Ling Han, and said, Tan Shuangshuang greets this senior brother. Ling Han nodded in reply to her greeting. Go away, you have no share of this man. Chen Ziyu quickly shooed her off. Clearly, this woman had only come here because she had witnessed the scene of Guan Dongyu being chased off. Why? The fact that a third heaven had succeeded in forcing a fourth heaven into retreat represented supreme aptitude. Wasn't this kind of man an excellent husband material that could not be found without much difficulty? Senior brother. Senior brother. This senior brother. More women walked over, just like sharks that had scented blood. How could Chen Ziyu manage to block them off all by herself? Involuntarily, she couldn't help but shout in anger. Why had you guys ignored Ling Han completely just now then? Right at this moment, sounds of commotion were heard. Celestial Maiden Qiuyun is here, someone cried out. Big sister is here. Chen Ziyu looked like a weight had been lifted from her. She had absolute confidence that once Ling Han saw Yan Qiuyun, he would definitely fall for her, and there was no need to worry that he would be hooked by some other witch. The masses surged, and a considerable number approached the doors. What man would not be interested in this exquisite beauty that was ranked 4th on the 100 Flowers scroll? This was a prospective partner ceremony, and those that attended it were naturally here to meet a prospective partner. Like the moon with a myriad of stars revolving around it, a beautiful woman walked out of the crowd, and there were many men tailing behind her, all trying to curry favor with her. Come, I'll introduce you to big sister, Chen Ziyu said. Chapter 25-26, My name is Li Si. Yan Qiuyun was like the moon surrounded by a myriad of stars. She was indeed extraordinarily beautiful, slightly more beautiful than even bewitching Maiden Row. She was shapely like a green lotus and beautiful beyond words. If she only had beauty as her strength, she would be nothing more than an adornment. However, she was also a prodigy of cultivation, having a strong presence. There were 5 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around her, and this was enough proof of how powerful she was. Chen Ziyu tugged on one of Ling Han's arms, dragging him with her as she forged onwards. The difficulty of trying to squeeze into the crowds was very high. All of them were celestial kings, and were exuding an intense presence. Once the gap in cultivation level was big, there was absolutely no possible way that they could barge in. Fortunately, Chen Ziyu was shouting as she walked, attracting Yan Qiuyun's attention. The latter deliberately stopped, and only then did realization dawn on everyone as they separated to allow Chen Ziyu to pass through. "Big sister, I found a good husband for you." Chen Ziyu was panting slightly. Barging past this crowd of people was like she had fought a battle with a great many celestial kings, which tired her tremendously. When her words fell, a considerable number of people instantly glared furiously at her and Ling Han. Yan Qiuyun glanced at Ling Han, and asked, "Oh, that's him?" Her expression was completely nonchalant, and she was all smiles. Chen Ziyu turned to take a look, and almost went mad in fury. That was because while she was grabbing one of Ling Han's hands, his other hand was still holding a plate, which he held close to his mouth, and he was still chowing down without a care. "Just how long has it been since your last meal? Or is it that you are the reincarnation of someone who died from starvation in his last life?" Chen Ziyu almost wanted to cry. She was working so hard here, but why did Ling Han not take the matter to heart at all when it was him that this concerned? "How should you be addressed, friend?" Yan Qiuyun asked with a slight smile. There was naturally no chance that she would fall for a third heaven celestial king, but she thought that Ling Han could make a good pair with Chen Ziyu, so she naturally had to show some concern. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "My name is Li Si." Yan Qiuyun was very skilled in keeping her composure, but even she felt the urge to hit someone when she heard this answer. "Even if you are not willing to tell me your name, you don't have to hoax me like this. Right one?" "Oh, so it is friend Li Si." She nodded, and then said to Chen Ziyu, "Ziyu, come here. I want to talk to you about something." It was a lie that she wanted to speak with Chen Ziyu. Actually, she just did not want Chen Ziyu to have further contact with Ling Han, and wanted to separate the two of them. Chen Ziyu gave an "oh," let go of Ling Han's hand, and walked over. Yan Qiuyun smiled slightly, and walked onwards. Then, she turned around and cast a look at Ling Han, her gaze slightly fierce, filled with warning. Naturally, she was indicating to Ling Han that he should not have any further inappropriate ideas about Chen Ziyu, or she would not be reserved to move against him. Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart. He merely smiled, and was just about to walk off when several malicious-looking men stood in his path and blocked him off. "Don't have any ideas about Celestial King Qiuyun. You are not worthy at all. Otherwise, we would not mind teaching you how to behave." These people all voiced their opinions, their words harsh. Ling Han glanced at them, they were all third heaven celestial kings. He shook his head. "With so many people courting her, why are you targeting just me? This proves that you guys are too weak, and you only dare to shout at me." Those celestial kings all sneered. That was nonsense. They were all just third heaven celestial kings. How could it be that they would dare to become hostile with fourth heaven celestial kings? "You are right." These people all nodded. Ling Han mumbled, "Am I such a magnet for bullies?" He suddenly moved. Pang, pang, pang. With just 3 punches and 2 kicks, those celestial kings were all thrown onto the ground. This was clearly a Celestial King tier battle, yet still became a brawl among hooligans. There was no flash of power of regulation at all. All of his strikes were physical and incredibly coarse. But the battle had still been resolved so quickly. Yan Qiuyun and her entourage had not walked too far off, and when they heard the commotion, they all turned their heads. Then, they saw the few celestial kings laid out on the ground as they moaned, while Ling Han clapped his hands as he walked back to the side of the plaza, and started eating again. "This brat," a young man in blue robes murmured lowly, raising a brow. There were 5 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him, and his aura was extremely frightening. Very extraordinary. In a few breaths' time, he has defeated celestial kings that are his equal in cultivation level, and it is not just one at that. "Is he a newly advanced monarch star?" another celestial king asked, smiling. He was dressed in a tight green suit, and though his words expressed how high his assessment of Ling Han was, his expression was completely serene. This was natural. Even if Ling Han was a 3rd heaven monarch star, so what? The other man himself was a 5th heaven celestial king, and with the superior suppression of an advantage of 2 cultivation levels, the gap in strength was extremely wide. There were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, and every single step forwards was as difficult as ascending the heavens. How could that just be empty words? Moreover, he was also a monarch tier, at least, and was just inferior by an evolution stage as compared to monarch stars. Yan Qiuyun appeared slightly surprised. She had not expected that Ling Han would actually be this strong. Before this, the first impression that Ling Han made on her was really too poor. He looked absolutely laid back and completely undependable, yet now it was proven that he was in fact a monarch star, which naturally exceeded her expectations. Celestial Maiden Qiuyun, there is no need to be concerned about this kind of minor character. "This way, please," the young celestial kings gathered by her said. Yan Qiuyun nodded. This was the world's paramount martial academy. To say nothing of monarch stars, there were even freaks whose evolution index reached 11 or 12. What need was there for her to pay special attention? Only Chen Ziyu realized that she had been tricked, and wanted to seek out Ling Han. Yet Yan Qiuyun had a firm grip on her, so she could only leave helplessly. "Brother, you've been rebuffed, haven't you?" When Ling Han returned back to his initial place, there were a number of young people who walked over. They comprised both men and women, and all of them were wearing expressions of mockery. "Hee, that is Celestial Maiden Qiuyun. How could she be someone that you can ever hope to ascend to be her equal? That's right. Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you are a monarch star. Merely now, monarch stars number in the thousands. You really aren't worth much," a beautiful woman said in a sour tone. She had previously tried to go up to Ling Han and strike up a conversation with him, but Ling Han had calmly rejected her. Thus, she was naturally displeased. Now that she had found an opportunity, how could she not take the chance to mock him? Ha ha ha. These people all laughed. They were no match for Ling Han, and there was no way that they could chase off a 4th heaven elite with their cultivation level of 3rd heaven. Seeing Ling Han rebuffed now, this actually became the source of their amusement. Ling Han shook his head. What kind of people were these? Even if they were monarch tiers, they shouldn't still be so superficial, right? Yet he did not know that these people were all locals of Flaming Frost Realm. In the first place, they held a low opinion of outsiders. Men would feel jealousy, and women would feel resentment, and added together, their behavior was incredibly hideous. Ling Han waved a hand. "Go further away. Don't exude a stench that would affect my meal." This guy. Those young men and women were all angered, but they were either 3rd heaven or 2nd heaven celestial kings. How could they be a match for Ling Han in a fight? Naturally, they did not dare to flip out on him. This drinking party is actually a prospective partner ceremony. We will just wait and see as you leave all by yourself in the end, someone mocked. That's right. If anyone actually falls for him, I will eat these tables. I'll eat the chairs. They deliberately spoke this way to increase the strength of their mockery. Right at this moment, a commotion arose once more at the doors. Luan Xing, goddess Luan Xing is here. When these words fell, it was like everyone in the plaza had gone mad suddenly. They surged towards the doors, scrambling all over one another. Goddess Luan Xing. The eyes of those young men and women also lit up. Both men and women were susceptible to the Empress's charisma. Chapter 25-27, The Exquisite Empress. Ling Han's heart jolted as well. It had been too long since he had last seen his wife. Everyone here were celestial kings, but every single celestial king seemed to have gone mad as they scrambled all over one another, surging in the same direction. Previously, Yan Qiuyun had been like the moon with a myriad of stars revolving around her, but now her entourage had basically dispersed. Aside from Chen Ziyu, only the two celestial kings in blue robes and green robes were left, but their expressions also held hints of hesitation, as if they were wondering if they, too, should go with the rest of the crowd. Yan Qiuyun's expression looked slightly livid. She had always been proud of her beauty, thinking that no one else could compare to her in this world. Furthermore, in her dimension, her beauty had indeed reigned supreme over a whole era. But now that she was here, she actually could only rank fourth, and furthermore, this was only this term ranking of the 100 Flowers scroll. In the overall leaderboard, she was not able to enter into even the top 100. But in the Empress's case? Not only was she top in this term ranking of the 100 Flowers scroll, she would be considered one of the most beautiful even in the overall leaderboard. With such a comparison, how could she not feel jealousy? The crowds were surging back inside because the Empress had already walked in. Her brilliance could not be concealed even if she was surrounded by the masses. Every single person looked like they were completely enchanted, intoxicated by the Empress's charisma. It should be known that these were all celestial kings. It would be wonderful if I could stand by the goddess's side. I just want to look at her from a close distance. If the goddess could just say a few words to me, even if I were to immediately die, it would still be worth it. Beside Ling Han, those young men and women murmured under their breaths. His wife's charisma was truly strong. Ling Han smiled slightly, and strode forwards, heading towards the Empress. Only the Empress was there, and there was no sign of Hun Yo or bewitching Maiden Ro. Hey, what are you forcing your way in for? There were people blocking his path, and Ling Han easily pushed them aside, but they were naturally displeased. They had only squeezed their way in so far after great difficulty. What are you doing now? Don't you know what first come, first served means? Ling Han naturally took no heed of them, and continued onwards. As his terrifying aura unfurled, there was no one that could stop him as they all stumbled aside. In such a manner, he was immediately standing out from the crowd. Yan Qiuyun saw this, and couldn't help but feel even more jealous. Though she did not have any feelings for Ling Han, he previously had just been one of her courtiers, yet now was overcoming all obstacles to curry favor with another woman. Furthermore, this woman was a great rival of hers at that, which made her extremely displeased. This shameless guy actually intends to really court Luan Xing? Chen Ziyu was also stunned, and felt that Ling Han was truly shameless. Furthermore, he had not just been making empty promises previously, but had really come for the sake of Luan Xing. Merely seeking his own humiliation. Those young men and women that had previously mocked Ling Han all sneered coldly. Who did not know that Luan Xing was extremely proud, and she was completely unconcerned about even the advances of Gu He, Xiaoxiong, Miao Hua, and other such freaks? If that were not the case, there would be no chance for others, either. Who would dare covet the woman that those monsters had set their eyes on? Everyone that saw this scene shook their heads, laughing at Ling Han, who had no estimate of his own measure. So what if you are a monarch star? Though the majority of disciples in the world's paramount martial academy were monarch tiers, there really were quite a large number of monarch stars as well. There would be thousands of them with every term. With Ling Han's strength, it was like he was walking on a plateau, no one capable of blocking his way, and adding the empress, whose personality was one to look down on the rest of the world, her steps did not stop at all. Hence, the two of them very soon encountered each other. No more than 3 meters separated them as they faced one another. Everyone was internally lamenting in pity for Ling Han. The empress was too proud, who dared to block her path? Even if the empress could not deal with him, when Gu Hui and the others found out, they definitely would move personally and help the empress resolve the problem. Thus, if one offended Gu Hui, Miao Hua, or the others, they would only be offending a single person, but if one offended the empress, that would mean offending all the freaks of this term at the same time. Only a fool would do something like that. One who was ignorant had no fear. This guy had to have just enrolled in the martial academy. The empress looked coldly at Ling Han, just about to say, "Scram," when she suddenly started. She did not have the frightening sense of smell of Hunyo, but having spent so much time with Ling Han, how could it be that she would be unable to recognize her own man? Even if Ling Han's appearance had changed now. Ling Han cracked a grin. He knew that the empress had already recognized him. The empress took a step, and... Xiao, it was like she had become an arrow that shot towards Ling Han. The goddess has moved. The goddess is not just beautiful. She is a great monarch star, and has formed a perfect celestial seed. Her evolution index has probably already reached 11. Thus, though she is only in the middle stage of 3rd heaven, her battle prowess is as high as 5th heaven. If that were not the case, how could she possibly obtain the admiration of Gu Hui and the others? Now that the empress has moved, what person of the same cultivation level could stop her? This guy's is going to be fuck. Pooh. Ah. A series of exclamations rang out as everyone dared not believe what they were seeing. Their mouths gaped widely, even their tongues lolling out in shock. What had they seen? The empress had not attacked with this pounce, but had rather leaped into Ling Han's arms. This. They had to have seen wrongly. How could it be possible that that haughty goddess would throw herself into the arms of a man? They rubbed their eyes again, yet gritted their teeth once more. Not only was the goddess still in the arms of that man even had an arm hooked around the goddess's slender waist, while his other hand was gently stroking the goddess's glossy hair. Pooh! Yan Qiuyun spluttered, coughing in spite of herself. Chen Ziyu was gaping widely. As she saw it, Ling Han was not even qualified to speak with the empress, yet now he actually had his arms around the goddess that everyone dreamed and yearned for. Gods, could it be that she was still dreaming? By the side of the plaza, those young men and women were all gaping in shock, feeling like they were in an illusion. Just moments ago, they had been mocking that Ling Han was trying to aim above his league, and actually wanted to court Yan Qiuyun. But in the end? The other had directly courted the goddess of the martial academy, who had surpassed Yan Qiuyun by who knew how many times over. They all felt their faces flush with heat, wanting nothing more than for a hole to open up on the ground so they could bury themselves inside. Holy fuck, what's going on here? Someone finally muttered. Could it be that this guy is expert in using enchantment techniques, and has bewitched the goddess? That must be it. Still, no matter what, when Gu Hui and the others find out, this brat will be done for. He will definitely be done for. Everyone came back to their senses. It was one matter for Ling Han being able to embrace the beauty now, but how could Gu Hui and the others just sit by and watch? To say nothing that this would be a group of infuriated freaks, even if only one of them moved, how could Ling Han be able to withstand their attacks? Sigh, the word lust was topped with a knife one. Yan Qiuyun also thought of this fact as well. Involuntarily, a hint of a smile curled up the corners of her lips. This time, this was really hitting two birds with one stone. Ling Han was going to be in trouble, but for the Empress to actually throw herself in the arms of a minor character, this naturally would cause her reputation to drop greatly. Goddess? More like psycho. Ling Han had no wish to turn himself into the focus of everyone's attention. Though it was inevitable now, he still pulled the Empress with him to the side of the plaza, beckoning to her to eat. The Empress couldn't help but laugh slightly. Her husband was truly a glutton. Seeing how the Empress was smiling so enchantingly, everyone was dazed. It had been so many years, but who had ever witnessed a smile appear on the Empress's face? Beautiful, too beautiful. Breaking news. Breaking news. Two people rushed through the doors in great hurry. Extremely groundbreaking news. Zhuo Kai is actually doing that with a man, completely naked, in the open in wild. They were Wu Ju and Su Shan. To their shock, they discovered that no one even gave them a second look, even though they had brought such exciting, groundbreaking news. Chapter 25-28 Groundbreaking News. Strange, could it be that this kind of thing had become so ordinary and everyday, and that was why no one was curious or concerned about it anymore? Both Wu Ju and Su Shan were surprised. They recalled how they had excitedly rushed to the destination, yet in the end witnessed two completely naked men lying on top of each other, shouting loudly as they shook. Even their faces had turned green. Heavens, this was really too hardcore, wasn't it? They naturally hated Zhuo Kai to death. It was one thing that he himself was a pervert, but he actually invited them to come and play together. Don't lead us down the wrong path too. Hurriedly, they rushed back, intending to publicize Zhuo Kai's scandalous actions. In addition, they also wanted to call Ling Han to accounting as well. He actually caused them to witness such a scene. Really, even their outlook on life was about to be distorted by the trauma. What? Zhuo Kai is actually that kind of man? Finally, someone recovered some of their senses from their astonishment, and began to accept this other piece of groundbreaking news. Zhuo Kai actually likes men? It is possible. This kind of spoiled young master has toyed with so many women that he's grown bored of them. Who knows, he really could want to try something new and refreshing. Don't say it in such a disgusting way. New and refreshing? I am about to throw up. I remember now. A few days ago, Zhuo Kai clapped a hand on my shoulder. At that time, he must have been having some ideas about me. Congratulations to you, brother. Who knows, maybe Zhuo Kai will recruit you to join his harem after a few days. This damn freak. More and more people were talking about this. This was indeed a big piece of news, and a huge scandal as well. Who was Zhuo Bing? He was a great pseudo-heavenly venerate, yet his descendant was actually toying with men. He could probably kill himself with the amount of blood he would throw up in his outrage. Really? Someone asked Wu Ju and Su Shan for confirmation. Of course it's real. I even recorded it with a memory crystal, Wu Ju said as he retrieved a crystal. Activating it with his source power, the crystal immediately glowed, revealing a three-dimensional scene. Wah! Instantly, sounds of disgust rang out all around. Two naked men lying on top of each other, roaring endlessly as they moved. Was there any need to ponder further what the two of them were doing? The one on the offensive was Zhuo Kai. That little wife is Wu Shi. Someone recognized the purple-robed young man. Of course, he presently was not wearing the purple robes. It is indeed Wu Shi. It can't be, right? Wu Shi is a monarch tier, at the very least, and I have met this person before. He is very normal. TSK, how could someone who has this kind of fetish tell you about it? If I had not seen it with my own eyes, I couldn't have believed it even if someone had told me about this. Everyone shook their heads. Wuxia was considered a young man with good prospects. How could he do something like this? Wu Ju and Su Shan looked for a while, and soon found Ling Han. Even if their cultivation levels had been forcefully dragged to this level, they were still celestial kings, after all. It was too simple for them to find a single person in a crowd of people. They ran over, planning to have their revenge on Ling Han. He actually dared to trick them, and caused them to witness such a scene. Scram! Before they even opened their mouths to speak, the Empress shouted lightly, her tone filled with dominance. Wu Ju and Su Shan had not spotted the Empress previously, as Ling Han was really too despicable. It wasn't right until they were rebuked that they looked towards the Empress. Instantly, they were staring fixedly at her. Goddess! It was actually Goddess Luan Xing. They both stood there blankly, incapable of speech, and were at a loss of what to do. Hurriedly, they retreated again. Only when they had retreated to the side did realization dawn on them. Hold on, weren't they going to get revenge on Ling Han? What were they doing now? But thinking of how beautiful and noble the Empress was, they could not muster the courage to make a second approach. Ling Han looked at his wife, and couldn't help but smile. After advancing into the celestial king tier, the Empress seemed even more noble and graceful, such that even he felt slightly incapable of handling her. As the duo ate, they talked about their experiences throughout the years. They were completely acting as if they were completely alone. Only each other existed in their eyes. Ling Han asked about Hunyo and bewitching Maiden Ro. Hunyo got the notice of a heavenly venerate, and was snatched to become his disciple, the Empress related, and could not help but smile. Ling Han wore a strange expression on his face. To gain the notice of a heavenly venerate who wished to take them as disciple, another person would be scrambling all over themselves for such good luck, but the Empress actually used the word snatched, which showed that the little girl had definitely been unwilling at the time. Only the little girl would act like that. Ling Han recalled how Hunyo had previously been snatched back to the Rock Palace. Wasn't it also against her will? This little girl had absolutely no concept of great opportunities, everything to her was just done however she willed it. Ro is attempting to break through to the third heaven at present, the Empress continued. Ling Han nodded. Originally, bewitching Maiden Ro only had the aptitude of King Tier, but with the use of Heavenly Dao Jade, she had forcefully filled the holes in her grasp of regulations and other such factors and became a Monarch Tier. Without much effort, she could reach the fifth heaven Celestial King Tier, but her progress rate naturally could not compare to a Monarch Star's, what more when the Empress's present evolution index was definitely more than 10. It was not only bewitching Maiden Ro who had improved, Great Lyso had little terror. After this battle beast had come to the flaming frost realm, it was like it had suddenly been freed of its chains. Its progress rate was astonishingly quick. By now, it was already in the fifth heaven, and in terms of merely cultivation level, it was not inferior to Heavenborn in any way. This should be because the overall level of flaming frost realm was higher, and had a very massive accommodating trait, which suddenly unsealed the rate of progression for Little Terror. It should be known that battle beasts were originally born for battle, so what was so strange about progressing quickly through the cultivation levels? Ling Han also related his own experiences, and the Empress couldn't help but feel heartache. She vowed that she would tear Heavenborn into pieces, and feed every single piece of him to the dogs. I have to be the one to avenge myself, Ling Han said seriously. He was determined to defeat Heavenborn. This was his next goal. This was just like how he had previously contended with Ji Wuming. This time, it was Heavenborn instead. Only a strong opponent could allow him to become even stronger. The two chatted for quite a long while, yet suddenly realized that an abrupt silence had fallen on the plaza. They raised their heads, and saw that everyone had turned their eyes towards the entrance. They looked over as well. A man dressed completely in black had appeared at the entrance, 6 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him. His aura had taken solid form, unfurling like dark clouds, and causing a sense of fear to rise up in everyone's hearts. Xiaofan, the empress murmured lowly. This man is very strong. It is rumored that he has surpassed Monarch Star, and his evolution index is as high as 11. So this was Xiaofan. Ling Han nodded internally. Xiaofan was a supreme monarch star of the 6th heaven celestial king tier, and his battle prowess has definitely soared to 7th heaven, and was very possibly approaching the 8th heaven. Thus, even Heavenborn was no match for this kind of elite, though he would definitely not lose, either. He knew why a sudden silence had fallen as well. That was because Xiaofan was presently courting the empress, and this was something that everyone knew. Yet, at present, Ling Han was actually acting intimately with the empress. He. Xiaofan's eyes swept over, and immediately discovered the empress. A hint of a smile actually appeared on his initially aloof face, but when he spotted Ling Han, this smile immediately froze. He humphed, and strode towards where Ling Han and the empress were. Here it is, here it is. There is definitely going to be a good show ahead. With Xiaofan moving, that guy would definitely be done for. Sigh, to actually dare covet the goddess without having enough strength. Isn't that just courting death? Quite a number of people whispered among themselves. The fact that Ling Han had embraced the empress had instantly turned him into a public enemy. Xiaofan stood firm, stopping around 3 meters away from Ling Han's table. Flicking a finger, he declared towards Ling Han, "Scram." It was only one word, simple, direct, and commanding. Chapter 25-29, Battle in 9 Deaths Formation. Ling Han had not even spoken when the empress stood up, her pretty face frozen over with ice. The one who should scram is you. In terms of dominance, the empress has never lost to anyone. Xiaofan looked towards the empress, and immediately revealed an intimate smile. Don't mess around. The empress was about to flip out, but Ling Han stood up and raised an arm to stop her, pulling the empress behind him. He chuckled. There is nothing much to say. Do you dare battle me in the 9 Deaths Formation? A battle in the 9 Deaths Formation? Everyone was stunned. Ling Han was truly bold if he dared to challenge even Xiaofan. However, this brat was no fool. The 9 Deaths Formation had a unique trait: when high-level celestial kings entered into a low-level formation, their cultivation level would be reduced to the corresponding level. For example, when everyone entered into the 3rd level of the 9 Deaths Formation, everyone's cultivation level would be suppressed to the 3rd heaven. Humph, why should I accept? Xiaofan asked coldly. Without enough strength, don't do something that would provoke me. Ling Han smiled calmly. In a battle of equals, I have never encountered someone that can match me. If you do not dare to take the challenge to battle me, just say so directly. This was a provocation. Everyone gasped. Ling Han was really daring to actually dare act so arrogantly. However, though battle was not forbidden in the martial academy, there were restrictions on cultivation level. The gap between the two sides could not be more than 2 levels, or an elite would appear and immediately call a halt to the battle. Thus, unless Ling Han foolishly agreed to battle with Xiaofan, it was absolutely impossible that Xiaofan would make a move on him. No wonder this guy was so confident. As it turned out, he had come prepared. Xiaofan glanced at the empress, his expression becoming increasingly dark, and he answered, "Fine, we will battle in the 9 Deaths Formation." He led the way, and walked out of the abode. Ling Han smiled, and also set out as well. Meanwhile, the empress was definitely following closely behind. Now that the trio had left, a commotion immediately arose as everyone surged outside. When the majority had left, Xianing came at a late moment. He looked at the scattered few that were here, and couldn't help but feel surprised. That was because he had come at this moment after much consideration, and thought that this moment should be right in the middle of things. Why were there still just a few people here? Ling Han, Xiaoxiong, and the others soon arrived at the entrance of the martial academy. The 9 Deaths formation was located ahead of them. Which level do we choose? Xiaoxiong asked solemnly. The second? Ling Han suggested. His body art would not be suppressed by the formation, so the greater the suppression of cultivation level, the better it was for him. For example, in the first heaven, he would be able to crush Xiaoxiong into the dirt with just a single finger. Of course, it was actually fine even if they entered into the third level of the 9 Deaths formation. His body art was too strong, and there was an extremely great chance of victory even against a third heaven supreme monarch star. However, he would not be able to easily suppress his opponent. Xiaoxiong didn't even bother to say anything, and directly entered into the formation through the first stone tablet. Ling Han grinned, and walked into the 9 Deaths formation as well. Now that they are both in the second heaven, the outcome of the battle would depend on whoever is stronger in a battle at the same tier. Whoever has the higher evolution index would have more of an upper hand. Then, it is needless to say that it would definitely have to be Xiaoxiong. His evolution index is as high as 11, and in this term of disciples, the only one that can suppress him is Huofurong. There is also Heaven-born. He is a monster. Everyone discussed spiritedly. They still had a higher opinion of Xiaoxiong. Even if his cultivation level was suppressed, a person with a higher cultivation level would definitely have some kind of advantage. This was something that could not be changed. Right at this moment, 2 imposing-looking men appeared at practically the same time, falling by either side of the empress. Gu He. Miao Hua. These were the 2 other super freaks, whose evolution index was rumored to have reached 11. Furthermore, in cultivation level, they have also reached 6th heaven, and possessed incomparable battle prowess. What's going on? Gu He asked. He was a completely different type from Xiaoxiong. He was wearing an amicable smile, and appeared very approachable. Lord Gu, Xiaoxiong is presently battling in the 9 Deaths formation, someone answered. Oh, with whom? Gu He was slightly surprised. Both he and Miao Hua were here, so who else would be worthy of a battle with Xiaoxiong? Li Si. Pooh. Gu He's and Miao Hua's expression became strange. Are you joking around with us? His name is indeed Li Si. More people nodded. At least, this was something that Ling Han had personally admitted. There is also a Zhang San here. Someone suddenly pointed at the first stone tablet. The name Zhang San was distinctly written at the 8th place on the stone tablet. Zhang San, Li Si. They're probably the same person. Hiss, though this person is named on the eternal stone, it has already been 7,000 years since his last appearance. Everyone surmises that it is possible that he used a forbidden technique to make it this far, which left extremely severe injuries on him, and that is why he has not appeared all this while. Could it be that he has recovered? If he used the forbidden technique again, it is possible that Xiaoxiong would really be outmatched. See, he had made it to 8th place through using a forbidden technique, and this was something that Xiaoxiong could not compare with. Now, if Ling Han used the same trick again, could Xiaoxiong win in a battle at the same tier? It's impossible, right? Both Gu He and Miao Hua were both feeling curious. Why would Xiaoxiong suddenly battle with this man? They made some queries, and couldn't help but look dark at the same time. He deserved it. If it was them, they would also move without the slightest hesitation. Fuck, he actually dared to make a move on their goddess. Hopefully, Xiaoxiong would teach this brat a harsh lesson, Gu He said. He truly is a foolish guy, Miao Hua also declared coldly. Someone's come out. A figure flickered behind the first stone tablet. He definitely could not have barged through the whole 9 Deaths formation, as he had appeared so quickly. Instead, he had to have returned on the way he had entered. Who was it? Everyone stood on their toes to see, and all immediately looked stunned. Ling Han, it was Ling Han. Just how long had passed, and he had already defeated Xiaoxiong? Even Gu Hui and Miao Hua were extremely stunned, their expressions becoming incredibly serious. Though they were both very proud of themselves, and thought that they were stronger than Xiaoxiong in a battle of equals, their superiority was still limited. No matter what, the battle would only be decided after a few days, at the very least. Furthermore, the gap between victory and defeat would definitely be negligible. Yet just how long had passed by now? Ling Han had already walked out. Just what kind of crushing upper hand did he have? Could it be that this guy's evolution index had reached 12? Stop right there. Xiaoxiong also appeared. However, when he ran out, everyone couldn't help but laugh out loud. That was because this guy was looking too tragic, his face completely swollen and battered. He did not have the slightest air of aloof pride that he had had previously now. At first, everyone was still hoping that Ling Han had not fought with Xiaoxiong at all. Instead, he would have just gone in, roamed for a while, and then come back out again. But looking at how Xiaoxiong looked now, who would have any more doubt? Ling Han was too strong, wasn't he? In a battle of equals, he could actually be as strong as this? This was absolutely one-sided. Ling Han turned his head, and asked smilingly, "What is it? Haven't had enough of being beaten?" Xiaoxiong's whole body was trembling in fury. "You cheated, your cultivation level is definitely higher than second heaven." Ling Han laughed. "There's something wrong with what you are saying. Even if my cultivation level surpasses the second heaven, my cultivation level would still have been suppressed to the level of the second heaven. Inside the 9 Deaths formation, everyone's cultivation level would be equal." Xiaoxiong was instantly rendered speechless. However, he kept feeling like there was something off. Ling Han was too strong, and his strength was completely illogical. "Or should we go in and fight again?" Ling Han suggested with a smile. Chapter 25-30, Forced to Retreat. "Fight your sister." Xiaoxiong almost cursed out loud. Previously, though he had defended himself with his full effort, it had not caused even the slightest ripple. He had still been beaten terribly. Another fight? "We will enter into the 3rd level of the Great Formation and battle again," Xiaoxiong declared darkly. He was not willing to take advantage of Ling Han either, because Ling Han was precisely in the 3rd heaven. "All right." Ling Han agreed decisively. They entered into the formation once more, and then immediately began another great battle. This time, Xiaoxiong clearly had a better fighting chance. That was because the 3rd heaven was indeed Ling Han's true cultivation level, and he no longer had the advantage of suppression on cultivation levels. However, merely in terms of regulations, Ling Han could match Xiaoxiong, and in terms of body art, he was slightly superior. With these two factors combined, it was equivalent to having 2 Ling Hans joining forces to fight Xiaoxiong. Was this something that Xiaoxiong could match? In only a few hundred moves, he was defeated once more. His face that had originally been swollen had now become even more unbearable to see. "Someone has come out. Is it still Li Si?" Outside, everyone could see a figure flash by, and reacted with shouts. It was Ling Han. Everyone felt a ruefulness that came out from having their expectations fulfilled. This guy had won again. Xiaoxiong also came out in quick succession, and the sorry way he looked now elicited involuntary laughter. His expression was dark, the fighting spirit in his eyes burning brightly. After 2 battles, he naturally realized that aside from the power of regulation, Ling Han still had body art, and the latter would not be suppressed by the 9 deaths formation. However, because Ling Han himself was a 3rd heaven, his body art also had an upper limit. If he made a move now, he would be able to suppress Ling Han easily. However, firstly, the martial academy had its rules, and secondly, even if he defeated Ling Han by using his superior cultivation level to suppress him, that would be an unjust battle. What was the point of it, then? Enter into the 4th level of the Great Formation to battle again? Xiaofan could not bring himself to say this. That would be equivalent to admitting that he was no match for Ling Han in a battle of equal tier. He looked meaningfully at Ling Han. If Ling Han's body art could improve alongside his cultivation level, it would be eternally impossible that he would be able to match Ling Han in a battle of equal tier, but if that was not the case, it would naturally be a different story. Humph. He left with a flutter of his sleeves. His pride caused him to choose the option of fighting Ling Han again when the latter had progressed further. This junior brother, what is the point of putting on a pretense? Tell us your real name. Gu Hui said to Ling Han. His face wore an amicable smile, as if he would never get angry. A true man never changes his name, regardless of the situation. My name is Li Si, Ling Han declared smilingly. Finally, Gu Hui showed a hint of displeasure. Though he has always been amicable, it did not mean that he had less pride than any other person. On the contrary, this kind of display of humility was only a way to show how proud he was. Miao Hua also looked furious. Do you think that just because we are 3 cultivation levels higher than you, we cannot deal with you? If you're not happy about it, I'll see you in the 3rd level of the Great Formation. In a fair battle, I will suppress every single person who comes to meet me, Ling Han declared, returning a tit-for-tat reply. Do you guys dare? Both Gu Hui and Miao Hua frowned slightly. Their battle prowess was on equal level with that of Xiaofan. Even if they were confident that they were stronger than the latter, it would not be too big of a difference. However, Ling Han had not taken too much time to defeat Xiaofan. Clearly, he had a crushing advantage in terms of strength. If they battled rashly, it would indeed be unwise. They decided to first pay a visit to Xiaofan. The latter had battled twice with Ling Han, so he should have gained some intel on Ling Han. The 2 of them did not speak, but rather turned and left at the same time. Awesome, a 3rd Heaven Celestial King actually forced 6th Heaven Celestial Kings to retreat, and these 2 were 2 of the top 3 on the battle prowess board of this term at that. Everyone was very excited. After today, another, new prodigy would emerge in the martial academy. The level of his freakishness surpassed the extent of Gu Hui and Miao Hua. He should probably be comparable to Heaven-born, right? They all returned to Xian Ying's abode, and continued the prospective partner ceremony. However, after the previous major events, everyone's interest had greatly declined. Bastard! A furious roar rang out as Zhuo Kai shot out like an arrow. He looked here and there, his eyes practically spitting fire in his fury. This was a great humiliation. He had actually had his clothes torn off, and lay on top of a man who was completely naked as well. Furthermore, they had been moving and rubbing against each other at that. Just the mere thought of it caused a feeling of incredible disgust to rise up in him. More importantly, this scene had even been witnessed by his pals. He knew what kind of personality these 2 people had. They would definitely broadcast it everywhere. Thus, his scandal would definitely be known to everyone by now. He hated Ling Han, who was the culprit behind all this, to death. You! He soon discovered Ling Han, and immediately shouted loudly, I want you to die. The Empress was furious, and pointed at Zhuo Kai menacingly. You lowly wretch should die 10,000 times over. Only now did Zhuo Kai see the Empress, and involuntarily withdrew his aura. The Empress's presence was so strong that he could not even raise his head. However, his fury was too strong. Very soon, he returned to a state of rage as he promised, "Whoever can kill him for me, I will give them 100 million star stones." Everyone only acted as if they had not heard anything. As disciples of the Martial Academy, as well as Celestial King tier Monarch tiers and Monarch stars, who would care about 100 million star stones? Zhuo Kai also knew that this was the wrong place to show off his wealth. These people were not his lackeys who would scramble to do his bidding if he only gave them some star stones. He thought for a moment, then took out a jade box, and said, "This is a crimson bright fire pill, which can greatly increase the cultivation level of 5th heaven celestial kings and below. It can save 10 billion years of hard cultivation, at least. Whoever kills that man, this crimson bright fire pill will belong to them." Instantly, a great many people looked tempted. Having the ability to save them 10 billion years of hard cultivation was extremely astonishing. Who wouldn't be tempted? But the problem here was, firstly, that no one dared commit murder in the Martial Academy, and secondly, just how many people would be able to match Ling Han? Thus, though everyone felt very tempted, there was still no one who stepped out. Zhuo Kai was stunned. He was not an idiot, after all. Upon deeper thought, he knew what he had done wrongly. He declared, "Whoever gives him a good thrashing, this crimson bright fire pill can be bestowed on them too." Cease the nonsense. A cold humph rang out, and Xianing spoke. He was a 9th heaven celestial king, but there was actually someone causing chaos in his abode. What would that make him then? Zhuo Kai raised his head and glanced at him. Then, clasping his hands, he said, "Greetings, Lord Xian." He did not show too much respect, because his great-grandfather was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Even though he had only just taken a single step further than a 9th heaven celestial king, the distance that this step breached was astonishingly wide. "Lord Xian, could you give me some face?" he asked. The others almost burst into laughter. A mere 3rd heaven celestial king actually dared to ask a 9th heaven celestial king to give him face. He really had no sense of self-awareness. Only a profligate young master like Zhuo Kai could do something like that. Even Xianing couldn't help but laugh. Shaking his head, he said, "To think that Senior Zhuo actually has a descendant like you, who knows if there would come a day when you would bring shame to his name." He waved a hand dismissively. "Go on." Boom, a great power surged out, and Zhuo Kai involuntarily retreated continuously, finally stopping only when he had retreated out of the abode. He glared angrily at the great doors, but did not enter again. Since a 9th heaven celestial king had spoken and moved, if Zhuo Kai still did not know what was good for him, it would only be seeking his own suffering. However, he was definitely not going to let this go. He turned around furiously, and strode off. Ling Han immediately whispered into the Empress's ear, "I'll be back in a while." Since Zhuo Kai actually had such a precious item like the crimson bright fire pill, he definitely could not allow the former to just leave like this. Chapter 25-31, Messing Around Again. Ling Han ran out, and sensed for Zhuo Kai's aura. Then, he immediately flew out. Though this was the Martial Academy, it was really, really too huge. One would not be able to see a structure or a few passers-by once every short distance. No, there were only 2 to 3 abodes constructed on a single peak at most here, and passers-by were incredibly few and far between. The great dragon carriage had naturally been taken by Zhuo Kai. Thus, he was traveling very quickly, but Ling Han's speed was even faster. As he traveled rapidly, not too long later, he saw that great dragon pulling the carriage behind it and galloping swiftly ahead of him. Ling Han channeled the regulations of space, and in a few bursts of teleportation, he rapidly closed the distance between them. The great dragon was still a celestial king, for better or worse. Immediately, it sensed that something was off. It turned its head, and discovered that Ling Han was actually approaching aggressively. Involuntarily, it couldn't help but shudder, and its 4 legs became weak. It hurriedly stopped, trembling in fear. It had developed a healthy fear of Ling Han from being beaten. Furthermore, it had witnessed how hardcore Ling Han's tastes were. What if he pushed the dragon together with some tiger or male bear as well? Then, how would it be able to face others in future? Milord. This dragon sent out a message through divine sense, trying its best to curry favor with Ling Han. Ling Han felt disdain. His impression of dragons was that they should be noble and proud, soaring above the 9 heavens. How could they possibly be so materialistic? Why have we stopped? Zhuo Kai opened the door of the carriage and walked out. When he discovered that the great dragon was actually playing dead and not moving at all, he was instantly angered, but when he spied Ling Han out of the corner of his eye, he couldn't help but shake, and showed an expression that contained both fury and fear. He naturally held a deep hatred for Ling Han, who had caused him to become the butt of everyone's jokes. However, at the same time, he was also afraid of Ling Han. Underneath absolutely crushing strength, he feared that he would be messed around with horribly again. Young Master Zhuo, what is it? Another person walked out. Who else could it be but that purple-robed young man, Wuxia? He, too, spotted Ling Han, and his expression involuntarily turned livid. He recalled that matter of the past that he could not bear to look back on. He wanted nothing more than to dig a hole to bury himself in. At the same time, he also longed to rush forth and kill Ling Han. But in the end, he shut his mouth, and did not say a word. Ling Han cracked a grin. I think that the crimson bright fire pill is not too bad. Could you bear to part with it and gift it to me? Zhuo Kai almost cursed loudly. The reason he had taken out this alchemical pill was so he could find someone to deal with Ling Han. If Ling Han snatched it from him, what had he done then? Pleasing his enemy with a gift? He could not be a fool like that. If I refuse, could it be that you will snatch it from me? Zhuo Kai exclaimed harshly, but it was clearly just putting on a tough act. Ling Han shook his head. No, no, no. I would have only picked up an alchemical pill from the ground, and definitely would not have stolen it from anyone. You can't frame me, or I will beat you up every time I see you. Zhuo Kai was confused. Could anyone pick up a crimson bright fire pill from the ground? He had barely finished the thought when he felt his vision blue. Pang, a fist had already struck him, and then... Pang, 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 the clothes that he was wearing once again exploded into bits after a series of heavy punches. His spatial god tool had also been beaten till it burst, and that crimson bright fire pill naturally fell onto the ground. Only now did Zhuo Kai know what Ling Han meant with his earlier words. He couldn't help but explode in fury. Ling Han had really gone too far. He would definitely complain to his great-grandfather, and ask his ancestor to step out and suppress this evil villain. Then, it finally sank into him to cover himself, and he hurriedly covered his lower half. Ling Han shook his head. Looks like you haven't given up on your malice. You should get another treatment. He looked towards Wuxia. What was your name again? Wuxia made no reply, but merely kept his guard up. Don't be nervous. You can be the husband this time. Ling Han moved, and grabbed out at Wuxia. Though Wuxia resisted with all his might, how could he possibly manage to defend himself? He was easily captured by Ling Han, and with a surge of power, he, too, once again became naked. No! The two men were both shaking their behinds, releasing anguished wails. Ling Han chuckled. He first threw Zhuo Kai onto the carriage, and then threw Wuxia in as well so that the two of them were laid out on top of one another. Then, playing the same trick, he tapped a specific point on each of them, causing them to roar in pain as they began to twist their bodies rhythmically. Instantly, the carriage began to sway. Ling Han even closed the carriage doors very nicely. The great dragon was spying on Ling Han quietly, and when it saw how Ling Han's eyes turned on it, it hurriedly turned back round in fear. "Stay here obediently, or I will slaughter you next time and make you into a stew," Ling Han threatened. The great dragon hurriedly nodded. It could tell by how Ling Han's eyes were shining, and by a glint of drool at the corner of Ling Han's lips, that this was a glutton that could not be more obvious. This was not just an empty threat. Ling Han picked up the crimson bright fire pill, then turned, and left. When the drinking party was over, everyone would also see the carriage *X. He returned to Xian Ying's abode, and sat together with the empress. At this time, Xian Ying just happened to be talking about matters of the Great Realm War, which soon captured Ling Han's attention. This was different from what he had imagined. Hysteria had taken the form of a dimension. Thus, what it had launched was a realm war. Its main power was focused on suppressing the flaming frost realm, but it was too strong. A single thought could create innumerable elites. Thus, all the elites were actually battling with the divine sense of hysteria. The strength of hysteria had already surpassed the range of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. It was a genuine overlord of a dimension. Furthermore, it had devoured a considerable number of other dimensions, and merely 3 of them had already been transcendent dimensions. It was really, really too strong. Ling Han himself had once been the overlord of a realm, and clearly remembered how he only had to have a thought, and he could form any kind of being he wished at the time as long as their overall power did not surpass the maximum limits of the realm. Hysteria was naturally capable of this as well. Furthermore, it was even stronger. There were many that had reached the level of a 6th-tier heavenly venerate among the elites it had mobilized. More importantly, it was a dimension itself, so its power was endless. It was fine no matter how many 6th-tier heavenly venerates died, as it could mobilize endless numbers of them. Of course, aside from 6th-tier heavenly venerates, there were also 5th-tier and 4th-tier heavenly venerates. In fact, there were also 9th heaven celestial kings, and they formed a great army. Their main priority was to attack their defense lines, and start a massacre after entering into Flaming Frost Realm. The strength of a dimension greatly depended on the beings of this dimension. If the Flaming Frost Realm was massacred, hysteria would be able to easily devour this dimension. The realm battlefield was extremely dangerous, and the slightest wrong move could result in death. However, at the same time, it was also filled with opportunities, because as long as one could manage to kill hysteria's creations, they could obtain benefits from the corpses left behind, which would stimulate the boost of one's cultivation level, and even help him to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. This was also why a great many 9th heaven celestial kings would go to the realm battlefield. Of course, the number of celestial kings that had died in battle was also shockingly high, but for that sliver of hope, even more 9th heaven celestial kings ventured there one after another. Ling Han anticipated venturing there greatly, but that place was the most dangerous place that only 9th heaven celestial kings would be worthy of setting foot in. If he went there now, it would completely be an act of suicide. He had best wait for a while longer. Ling Han suppressed his impulsive urge. Subsequently, Xian Ying took charge of the drinking party, and encouraged them to socialize among themselves, and see if they could encounter someone they liked. "Let's go." The empress tugged on Ling Han's hand, and the 2 people left the abode. They then went to the empress's accommodations. Bewitching Maiden Ro was not here. She had her own abode, and was presently in a state of seclusion, attempting to break through to the 3rd heaven. Thus, Ling Han had no plans to disturb her. And in Hunyo's case, she had already left the martial academy, and she probably would not be returning anytime soon. That is a 4th-tier heavenly venerate, and his title is Earnest Meditation, the empress informed him. Ling Han nodded. He took out the crimson bright fire pill. "I want to study this alchemical pill, and if I could trace its composition through analysis." "Oh, right, where's Wally?" Chapter 25-32, Discussion. Wally had also gone to the Flaming Frost Realm with Zhou Heng, and Ling Han found this out from the message that Hun Yo, the Rain Emperor, and the others had left behind. The Empress spread out her hands, indicating that she did not know. With how proud she was, how could it be that she would concern herself with knowing the whereabouts of others? Ling Han was speechless. This was definitely his wife, as true as she could be. He studied the crimson bright fire pill himself. If he could concoct it, it would be too helpful to their group. A day passed, and quite a lot of interesting topics emerged immediately in the martial academy. For example, a powerful man named Li Si thrashed Xiao Xiong madly in the 9 Deaths formation, and it was done twice at that. Or for example, how goddess Luan Xing was suddenly courted, and this guy that was so lucky that he had drawn the jealousy of countless people, with countless people cursing him with straw dolls, was still that Li Si. Another example was how it was unknown why the trend of homosexuality had suddenly arisen in the martial academy, and the first pair to come out of the closet was actually the young master of the Zhuo clan and Wuxia. What was even more ridiculous, these two people were actually caught having S** out in the open. And even more ridiculous was that the two of them had not actually done this once. They had just been exposed, and in the blink of an eye, they were again caught having S** in the carriage. It was one thing for you to have carriage S** in your own abode, but the carriage was actually parked by the roadside. Everyone who passed by could see the rhythmical shaking of the carriage, as well as hear those bursts of moans. Shameless, too shameless. Of course, Zhuo Kai's matter was just a joke, but this kind of gossip had the greatest potential of spreading. In just a single day, this news had spread throughout the entire martial academy, and who knew if it would spread to Zhuo Bing, who was still far in the realm battlefield. Who knew if this news would directly kill the old geezer with fury? Ling Han just happened to be working hard on studying the crimson bright fire pill, but the Empress called him over merely a day later. There was a dog who had come to pay him a visit. The large black dog sat in the great hall like a human being, his paw holding a teacup, looking deep and putting on pretense of mystery. "Little Han, come help Grandpa Dog massage my leg." The large black dog did not even have to turn around. He was a 9th heaven celestial king, so his divine sense was naturally strong. Ling Han was surprised. "How did you recognize me?" He had cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique, and even Heavenborn had not discovered anything strange about him. Tisk. The large black dog's expression was filled with disdain. "Don't I know you well enough? The moment I heard about Zhuo Kai's matter yesterday, Grandpa Dog immediately figured out that someone had messed around with this unlucky boy. Aside from me, I believe that only you, who have gained my true inheritance, would think of such a way to mess around with someone, little bastard." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This large black dog himself was the ancestor of messing around with people. His recognizing others was actually through recognizing their way of messing around. "It's great that you are here. In the future, when I mess around with anyone, you can help cover for me," he said laughingly. "No problem." The large black dog patted his chest, looking very loyal. Ling Han said calmly, "I heard that the ancestor of the Zhuo clan is a pseudo-heavenly venerate." Grandpa Dog suddenly feels a bit of a stomachache. "I seem to have eaten some expired beef skewers yesterday. I'm going to find that guy and get revenge. He actually dared to sell this kind of things to Grandpa Dog." The large black dog immediately slid down onto the ground, and then looked like he was about to run outside. This damn dog, he really was the type to bully the weak, but tremble before the strong. There was no cure for him. Ling Han hurriedly stopped him. "Can't you have a bit of backbone in you? Pay, what is backbone worth? Is it edible?" The large black dog was completely shameless, but then again, it had never felt ashamed, either. Ling Han sighed. "Zhuo Bing is in the realm battlefield, and there is no way he can return in the short term. Why does Grandpa Dog's stomach not hurt all of a sudden? The large black dog rubbed his belly. As expected of Grandpa Dog, a ninth heaven celestial king. In the future, I am a being destined to become a heavenly venerate. My physique is really good. Ling Han gave him the middle finger, and then said seriously, the Tower of Three Realms has now fallen into Heavenborn's hands. We have to think of some way to get it back. This was the last inheritance from the karmic life heavenly venerable, and definitely could not be allowed to fall into the hands of another. The large black dog also became serious, and said, though I can suppress that brat, firstly, the martial academy has its rules, so it would not be appropriate for me to move publicly. Secondly, that brat is a manifestation of divine metal. Even Grandpa Dog cannot penetrate his defense. If we wanted to forcefully snatch back the Tower of Three Realms, it would be difficult. Ling Han also knew this. He slowly nodded, and then said, however, Heavenborn must definitely be dealt with. Furthermore, I have battled with him on the celestial path. At the last crucial moment, it was the lingering intent of the karmic life heavenly venerable that appeared and distracted him, which allowed us to successfully escape. Lord Yuan Sheng. The large black dog was instantly excited. Let's go. Grandpa Dog will immediately go and slaughter that brat, and save Lord Yuan Sheng. Seeing how excited it was, Ling Han nodded internally. At least on the issue of the karmic life heavenly venerable, the large black dog was still extremely loyal, and did not shame its virtue as a dog. Woof, your beady eyes are blinking like mad, are you cursing Grandpa Dog inside your head? The large black dog was extremely sensitive. Ling Han put on a serious face. I was complimenting you. Then, he pondered slightly. Heavenborn is the manifestation of the celestial realm, and it can be said that there is no way that anyone beneath heavenly venerable tier could do anything against him. In terms of regulations, ninth heaven celestial kings were the pinnacle. Though heavenly venerable tier was created through the back door by the heaven and earth, if the heaven and earth could really do as they willed like this, would heavenly venerates still emerge? The power of heaven and earth was boundless, but was restricted through regulations. This was the law of how the Genesis world worked, and it could not be gone against. Thus, Heavenborn was indeed very freakish, but there was definitely no way he could be freakish to an unlimited extent. Could it be that I can only deal with him after becoming a heavenly venerate? The large black dog was slightly irritable. Though both he and Ling Han had the potential to become a heavenly venerate, and this chance was even higher in the flaming frost realm, that would definitely be a matter of countless years later. To become a heavenly venerate, it was only a small token to spend a few epochs to accumulate enough comprehension and strengthen foundations. If he had to wait this long, the large black dog would not be able to bear it. Ling Han was also thinking deeply, and he said, to deal with Heavenborn, the first thing we have to do is deal with his physique. But aside from heavenly venerable tier, what else could do anything against divine metal? He looked at the large black dog, and the large black dog was also looking at him. The man and dog exclaimed at practically the same time, a heavenly venerate tool. Divine metal was on the same level as celestial king tier, so only something above the level of celestial king tier could damage divine metal. Ling Han took out the divine demon sword. Then the first thing we have to do is boost this divine sword to the heavenly venerable tier. Hiss, that would require a shocking amount of divine metal, the large black dog said through clenched teeth. Ling Han cracked a grin. That would have to depend on you. Why does it have to be me? It is clear that the one benefiting is you, brat. Unless you give this sword to me, the large black dog declared shamelessly. Ling Han said, firstly, you are a ninth heaven celestial king, and possess great power. There are only a limited number that can contend with you in this world. Secondly, you are a dog, and have a good sense of smell. With such a strong nose, it would naturally be easy to find divine. Woof, I'll bite you to death. The large black dog was furious, and immediately pounced out. Naturally, Ling Han could not possibly be a match for a ninth heaven celestial king. He hurriedly called a ceasefire, and then continued, "You should know where Wally is staying at, right? I need to find him for something." "Oh, right, how is your understanding of the fundamental power of the Genesis world?" The large black dog's expression turned gloomy. "It's difficult, too difficult. The first step of Heavenly Venerable Tier began from the unique power of a dimension, but Wally's model was meant for 6 great fundamental powers, and directly began from the second step. Thus, the large black dog, who was only a ninth heaven celestial king, was completely baffled. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.